Good morning, Dumelang, bonjour. Welcome to all across Africa, particularly those gathered in Gaborone today, day 3 of Africa Accelerating 2020. Ministers, Your Excellency, and to those gathered across Canada, a very good morning to you, including honored guests with us here in Toronto. We have got wonderful speakers with us, and among those ministers who've spoken to date, we've also got a 7th minister addressing us today, Minister Lee White from Gabon. It's also my great honor to welcome Minister Roy McLaren, who served as trade minister among many other roles here in Canada, who is with us today. And certainly this topic of free trade is one in which we're greatly honored to have you with us and to have the sharing of your insights throughout the program and beyond. It is my great honor once again to thank Lucara Diamond and Lucara Botswana for bringing us to what is ultimately the final day of an incredible 3-day program that was so finely curated and supported for the months leading up to this week. Of course, leadership is in no short supply, and at the Canada-Africa Chamber of Business, our chair of the board, Mr. Sebastian Spio-Gabra, will be doing the official welcome. And so for that, to lay the foundations and the context for this day, free trade and innovation, I welcome the chair of the board, Mr. Sebastian Spio-Gabra. Welcome.
Thank you. Good morning, everyone, and good afternoon to those of you in Botswana. Thank you so much for all of you who are joining us. And again, I join esteemed president who really has, in this very short period of time as the head of this organization, has helped to transform this organization into one of the most effective, or the most effective voice for Africa in Canada. And that is not a small feat. It's something which many people over the years have tried to do in various forms, and your leadership and that of our colleagues, Jack and Susan and many others, and the members of the board, many of whom are watching, has been so instrumental in helping us. So thank you so much. Again, today we are going to sort of focus on free trade, and it's interesting to note that actually a small role the Chamber played in the African Continental Free Trade Agreement. We were represented in Niamey by a president during the deliberations that led to the adoption of that treaty. And we've pledged our full throated support to the Secretariat and His Excellency Wamkele Bene, who is a friend of the Chamber and who will be speaking to us later today. We fundamentally believe, fundamental to our core belief, is that trade is the basis of the peaceful existence of nations, as it is the basis of the peaceful existence of different cultures and different people. That if people actually come to believe in a very strong sense that something that they have, they can exchange it for value with another group of people who have something else or who possess a different skill. That forms a basis of positive reinforcing relationships, and you don't get to conflict and war. And in a certain sense, one could even argue that the conflicts that we have seen in Africa over the last generation is partly because within Africa itself, there's very little intra-African trade. And within the countries themselves, the infrastructural linkages between the capital cities, the ports, the areas that have, say, mining capacities, and the hinterlands that sometimes have mostly agricultural capacities are not well linked. And because they are not well linked, it leads to centripetal and centrifugal forces, which allows countries to basically become destable. And so we are totally committed to this idea of trade. And we believe that if we could say that the second half of the 20th century was one where aid became dominant, obviously starting with the Marshall Plan, which, by the way, was for Europe and not for Africa. And then the institutions, the Bretton Woods institutions, the World Bank, IMF, and all the ancillary bodies, that in a certain sense, the 21st century has proven that trade is really the key. And you look at a country like China, with all its problems and all its challenges, which in one generation has transformed itself from a developing country to a country which clearly is going to be one of the most dominant players, if not the dominant player of the 21st century. And it wasn't because China manufactured enough nuclear weapons. It's not because China invaded the moon. It's because China basically built its internal capacities to trade. And I tell my kids, whenever we use any product at home, I tell them to turn to the back of the product and I say to them, where is this made? And my daughter will often tell me it's made in China. 8 out of 10 times it's made in China. So I tell my daughter that, we have to have products that say made in Africa. And it is your responsibility and your generation's responsibility. My daughter is only 7 years old. Her responsibility to one day have products made in Africa. So this conversation today, while lively and interesting, is of significant importance to the entire stability of Africa, the security arrangements in Africa. So again, thank you so much. And again, thanks to Lucara, thanks to all our colleagues for all the great work you've done. And I look forward to a wonderful, wonderful interaction. Thank you so much, Mr. President.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chair, and for your consistent leadership and particularly your private experience investment, generating investment in the billions from your time on Wall Street and now in Canada into Africa. And no doubt that is set to increase with the right enabling environment and context. It is my great pleasure to welcome our next speaker, our ministerial address for the morning, and that is Minister Lee White of Gabon. Without further ado, I'd like to take the opportunity to welcome Chamber Vice President, also originally Gabonese, Mr. Jacques Numtumbe, to welcome officially our next speaker, Minister White.
Dumelang in Gaborone, in Pilikwe, in Palape, in Mkhubile, Bolaning in Gabon, Bolaning in Libreville, Loango, Bitam, Fugamu. Central Africa, to me, seems to be a little bit overlooked when we talk about investment. So today we have an opportunity to hear from someone who knows very well the area in probably one of the most beautiful countries in Africa. I'm not saying that because I'm from Gabon, but I think it's fair to say that you will hear it from Honorable Minister Lee White. I have the pleasure today to introduce Honorable Lee White, Gabon's Minister of Water, Forest, the Sea and Environment. He's also in charge of climate change, SDGs, and land use planning. Professor Lee White has been working in the African forest zones since 1984, initially in West Africa, in Sierra Leone, Nigeria, and in Central Africa since 1989. So for 15 years, he ran the Wildlife Conservation Society program in Gabon. He was also the main actor for Gabon matters concerning national parks and ecotourism development. After 20 years running the Wildlife Conservation Society in Gabon, and almost 10 years as Executive Secretary for Gabon's National Parks Network, Honorable Minister Lee White was made Minister of Forests, the Sea and Environment for Gabon. He's a professor, basically an honorary professor at the University of Stirling in the UK. He has a PhD in zoology and animal biology from the University of Edinburgh. It is my pleasure now to introduce Honorable Lee White, who's going to talk about Gabon. Thank you very much.
So thank you for that long introduction. I want to tell you about forestry in Gabon, how it's a very interesting investment, and how we plan to use forestry investment in Gabon to save the Gabonese rainforest and hopefully the Congo Basin rainforests. Like many African countries, forestry started a long time ago in Gabon. Actually, in 1889, the first timber was exported from Gabon to Germany. And for over a century, from 1889 to 2009, we exported logs, unprocessed logs, from Gabon to much of the world. Initially to Europe, to Germany, France, UK, Belgium, later on to Southeast Asia, to China, to the US, and so on. We were classically a source of cheap natural materials, and when we do the economics, when you cut and transport logs from the rainforest to a port, and that's the only economic development you have from your forestry sector, you capture just under 4% of the value of the timber. You capture about 3% of the jobs that you can create from the raw natural materials. And so for over a century, Gabon was subsidizing the development of many of the countries that we call today developed or emerging economies. In 2010, or actually 2009, late 2009, President Ali Bongo, our president, newly elected president at the time, went to Copenhagen for the climate summit in Copenhagen. About 120 heads of state came together to basically to save the climate, to save the planet, if you want. It was a fairly controversial meeting, but in that meeting, the president made a very strong commitment to dealing with climate change, to preserving Gabon's rainforest, which covered 88% of the country at the time. We were very active in the RED process, the process whereby the developed world was promising to subsidize forest preservation through the carbon market. And so we stuck very strongly to those commitments that we made in Copenhagen. We renewed them in Paris when finally the Paris Agreement came along. We worked actively on the RED process. But in 2012, the president figuratively beat me about the head and said, look, Lee, the RED process, this voluntary process whereby international governments are going to voluntarily give us money to preserve our forests, it's not going to work. It's never going to go to scale. And there's no way we can develop our country on the basis of donor money that comes and goes. And, you know, we see in the current tragedy, the COVID tragedy, had we been depending on the international community to fund our forests, all of that money would have been deviated into the COVID crisis and we would be left wanting. He said we have to, if we're going to save the rainforest of Gabon, we have to make the rainforest of Gabon precious to Gabon, precious to the Gabonese people. We have to develop a forest economy that preserves the rainforest. The first decision he took was to ban the export of logs. At the time, we were converting about 15% of our logs into processed timber, so 85% of our logs were going out. Overnight, we banned the export of logs and challenged the forestry industry to develop and to start transforming more and more of the wood in country. It was a somewhat controversial decision. We were told we were crazy. President Sarkozy of France came to Gabon 3 months later and tried to convince the president he'd made a bad decision. But we stuck to our guns, and 10 years on, our forest economy has been multiplied by 4, by a factor of 4. And the number of jobs in the timber sector have been multiplied by 3. So today we have 27,000 jobs in the forestry sector, and we have an annual economy of about $1 billion US. We've also decreased our carbon emissions by about 40% in that process, and so we've done quite well. But today, something like 90% of what we're exporting is basically planks. It's what we call first level transformation. And again, in our economic models, if you export just planks, if you export first level transformation, you're capturing about 20%, actually 18 to 19% of the potential value of timber, and you're creating about 20% of the potential job creation that you could make from these natural materials. So we took a look around the world, and we took a look at Malaysia, and we chose Malaysia because Malaysia has 21 million hectares of tropical rainforest, and Gabon has 23 million hectares. So we're almost the same size in terms of our natural forest resources. But Malaysia has a forest economy of almost $6 billion US, so 6 times our economy. And they have 320,000 jobs, so 8 or 9 times as many jobs in their forest sector. When we look at the difference between our 2 countries, the Malaysian forest economy is doing a lot of second and third level transformations. They're building a lot of furniture, and they've invested in forestry plantations. Fast-growing plantations to create cheap wood, which can be combined with beautiful precious hardwoods from the rainforest to make furniture. So you can put chipboard or plywood sandwiched in amongst beautiful hardwoods from the rainforest and create beautiful furniture, which is much cheaper to create and therefore cheaper to sell, but where you can make more profits. And so that's what we are now doing in Gabon. We just imported 180,000 seedlings to start our first plantation. We have a vision of getting to 300,000 hectares of plantation forests over the next 6 to 10 years. That will be a major carbon sink as well as a major economic asset for the country. We now are producing furniture. It's still somewhat limited in its scope, but our push now is to move as much of our forestry industry towards second and third level transformation, integrating these plantation forest woods into the forest economy. And our expectation is over the next 10 years that our forest economy will increase from $1 billion US to $10 billion US, and that we will create something like 200,000 jobs, which is extremely important for Gabon, like it is for most African countries, because we all have very young populations. There are 50% of our population is in school and university right now. And so we're going to have to create hundreds of thousands of jobs in Gabon over the coming decades to be able to give these young people who are in school a proper future. And so this really is now the time to invest. We've done the heavy lifting. We've created special economic zones where we now have over 100 timber processing companies working just outside of Libreville. We're creating ecosystems, but industrial ecosystems where companies can do first, second, third level transformation. We're now recycling 100% of our waste hardwoods into activated charcoal. We're about to open our first MDF plant so that all of our softer woods will get recycled into high-value product. And so the industry is exploding, and what we're really looking for now is investment from companies that have the capacity to create second and third level transformation. We're looking for companies that have the technology to make furniture in Gabon. We're offering fiscal incentives to bring companies to Gabon with the African Free Trade Zone. Obviously, we can access the African market with the AGOA arrangement. We can access the US market. there's vast markets in Africa, both for plywood, for furniture, for housing, if we can make housing out of timber. So this is a sort of a, not quite an appeal. It's I want to get the message across that this is the time to invest in sustainable forest products in Gabon, and that by investing in those products, you are investing in the future of the Congo Basin forest. Because if the Congo Basin forests are not creating jobs and livelihoods for the Congo Basin people, then they are unlikely to survive over the next 2 or 3 decades. And if we lose the Congo Basin forests, we lose the rainfall in Ethiopia, we lose the rainfall in the Sahel, and Africa will be completely destabilized in 20 to 30 years, with hundreds of millions of climate refugees running around the planet. So running around the continent. So the message is it's the right time to invest, but also that investment is an investment in the future of the planet. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Minister Lee White, for your remarks, and particularly drawing that, of course, to the context of the free trade discussions, particularly with the regional focus in Central Africa. It's now my pleasure to turn to Southern Africa, but in fact to a speaker in her capacity, given South Africa's role at the African Union. High Commissioner Sibongiseni Dlamini Mtambo is the South African High Commissioner to Canada, and she had assumed these duties in 2017. She's the president of the Ottawa Diplomatic Association. From 2017 to 2020, the High Commissioner was chairperson of the Women's Head of Diplomatic Missions in Canada. For those gathered in the capital of SADC, Botswana, today in Gaborone, noteworthy is the fact that she chaired the SADC group in Canada from 2017 to 2019. She has served in a number of roles, has got qualifications in higher education, has successfully led and overseen the peaceful democratic elections in South Africa on 2 occasions in her role at the IEC, with the strength of South Africa's democracy and vibrancy. She's also been focused in the South African government at departments of tourism, departments of economic development, and has been focused on skills development, strategy, and training. A very warm welcome for remarks before His Excellency Wamkele Mene to the High Commissioner of South Africa.
Thank you so much, Gareth. Chair of the Board of the Canada-Africa Africa Chamber of Business, Mr. Sebastian Spio Gabriel, President of the Canada-Africa Chamber of Business, Mr. Gareth Blow, and the Secretary General of the African Continental Free Trade, His Excellency, Mr. Wamkele Mene, Excellencies, distinguished guests, ladies and gentlemen. At the outset, and on behalf of the South African Minister of Tourism, Ms. Mama Loko Kubai Nkubane, who was scheduled to deliver some remarks, please accept the Minister's apology for not being able to join us today due to unforeseen engagements. However, it gives me a great pleasure to lend my voice at this very important session. So it gives me great pleasure to lend my voice at this very important session, which is expected to be as constructive and as engaging as the past 2 days. I'm especially delighted that again we will get to hear from His Excellency Mr. Wamkele Mene, the Secretary General of the Africa Continental Free Trade Area. Early in the year, we expressed our desire to physically welcome His Excellency to Canada for more robust engagements with the Canadian business community, but because of COVID-19, most of our plans had to change. His Excellency Mr. Mene was officially inaugurated as the first Secretary General of the Africa Free Trade Agreement Secretary this year in Addis Ababa. The appointment of Mr. Mene as the Secretary General is a huge milestone towards the operationalization of the AFTA. Not only is His Excellency responsible for promoting the successful implementation of AFTA, he is also the face of the free trade area. The African Continental Free Trade Area comprises 55 African countries and constitutes the largest number of countries in free trade area negotiations in the world. The AfTA, as one of the flagship projects of the African Union's Agenda 2063, aims to build an integrated market in Africa, an integrated market of over 1 billion people with a combined GDP of approximately 3.3 trillion US dollars. As chair of the African Union, South Africa welcomes the strides made in the implementation of the AfTA. For Africans, the trade agreement represents a game changer in that it will boost intra-Africa trade as well as increase much needed job creation, infrastructure development, and it will enhance the bargaining power of the continent in terms of its relations with other trading blocs. Many countries are establishing bilateral platforms for improving and advancing relations with Africa. The justification lies in the potentials and promise of a continent replete with resources and rich in diversity. When we talk resources, this includes human resources. It includes our youth. It includes our women. The agreement will contribute to the growth and diversification of our economy, and therefore it will create jobs as well as reduce inequality and unemployment. The agreement will also reduce tariffs, and it will benefit entrepreneurs, including medium to small businesses. I must point out that Canada is lagging behind in this growing momentum to build strong and strategic partnerships with Africa. Yet, Canada unites all the elements for a more robust engagement with the continent. There are several opportunities and avenues for Canada and Africa to build mutual beneficial partnerships. As Canada seeks to diversify its trade partners, we wish to encourage this country to play a more active role in engaging with the continent in order to leverage on the benefits of the free trade area. This country should consider increasing its trade and investment footprints on the continent. Unfortunately, for the past few months, the world has been ravaged by the coronavirus pandemic. We are indeed mindful of the devastating impact of COVID-19 outbreak, not only on the public health system on the continent, but the dire negative consequences COVID-19 will have on the African economies. This is a time for all of us to work together as we attempt to address the worsening effect of the pandemic. Mr. Mene's task has been made even more difficult by COVID-19. We are fully aware that a number of planned activities has had to be reviewed. However, I wish to reiterate our support. The successful implementation of AfTA will be a huge milestone towards the realization of the Agenda 2063, the Africa we want. Once again, I wish to welcome and to thank all our speakers and participants in today's event. I also wish to thank the Canada-Africa Chamber of Business for all your efforts towards growing trade relations between Africa and Canada. I hope this is again going to be another successful day. Thank you, Gareth.
Thank you very much, Your Excellency, and for your ceaseless support in promoting this deal and the activities of the African Union here in Canada. Well, in light of that introduction of His Excellency Wamkele Mene, it's my great privilege to invite him to offer those prepared remarks. As he's currently on the road for African Union business, having just met recently with President Ramaphosa in the latest engagement, he has done a pre-prepared video, but there will be an opportunity for engagement as well with him, as will be announced shortly through a series of events, not just this particular occasion. And may I note that the most successful event at the Chamber to date prior to this conference was the event we held with Minister Mary Ng and His Excellency Wamkele Mene. And no doubt we're going to see that repeat. We've broken the record numbers again. Clearly, this topic is one of incredible interest across Canada and across the continent. I give over for the message from His Excellency Mene. Thank you.
Good afternoon. I want to thank the Canada-Africa Chamber of Business for inviting me to give this keynote address and to participate virtually in your deliberations. Of course, I would have preferred to be there in person. However, given the travel conditions today as a result of COVID-19, it is not possible for me to be there. But I do hope that in the near future, we will have an in-person engagement. In the context of increasing trade tensions, increasing trade and investment protectionism, and unilateral trade measures among key global players, as well as the adoption of inward-looking approaches, the imperative for an integrated African market becomes all the more important. Africa's vulnerabilities and limited participation in global trade is indicative of its traditional reliance on the export of raw commodities and the import of value-added products. The recent global financial and economic crises, including the COVID-19 pandemic, have demonstrated the vulnerability of many African economies to external shocks, including fluctuating commodity prices. The continent's full export potential will remain unfulfilled unless we address the challenges of poor infrastructure, small and fragmented markets, underdeveloped production structures, shallow industrial base, and inadequate economic diversification. Until the onset of the COVID-19 pandemic, Africa was the second fastest growing region in the world after Asia. According to the International Monetary Fund's World Economic Outlook database, in the year 2019, 7 of the world's 10 fastest growing economies in the world were in Africa. The African Development Bank had projected Africa's economic growth to be at 3.4% for 2020, before the onset of the pandemic. Contrast that with the bleak economic outlook that confronts Africa today, which of course confronts the rest of the world also. The African Union Commission projects Africa's economic growth to contract by between 2.1% in an optimistic scenario and 4.9% in the most extreme scenario. The World Bank projects that as a consequence of the impact of COVID-19, Africa may experience a recession for the first time in 25 years. Ladies and gentlemen, Your Excellencies, given all of this, given this bleak economic outlook, it may appear as if the start of trading under the AfCFTA, which is scheduled for the 1st of January 2021, could not have been planned or could not have happened at a worse economic time. However, I believe that the bleak economic outlook that Africa confronts today challenges us to think very innovatively, to think very creatively about how and what we can do to re-inject dynamism and growth back in Africa's economy. At the heart of Africa's economic recovery is the private sector taking full advantage of implementation of the AfCFTA as various countries across the African continent liberalize trade and reduce regulatory and non-tariff barriers to trade. The objective of boosting intra-Africa trade by opening new markets across Africa cannot be achieved by governments alone. certainly cannot be achieved by the AfCFTA Secretariat alone. The role of governments and the AfCFTA Secretariat is to establish the necessary regulatory and legal conditions for cross-border private sector economic activity to take place unhindered. As the AfCFTA Secretariat, we are committed to working with the state parties to the AfCFTA to ensure that private sector-led trade becomes the driver for Africa's economic recovery from January 2021 year on year. As I have observed before, if the AfCFTA does not result in inclusive trade and broad-based economic activity, it shall not resonate with Africans and it shall not be successful. In this regard, we are exploring various modalities for ensuring inclusivity in the implementation of this agreement. We are exploring various digital-enabled platforms that are aimed at enhancing market access and trade connectivity of small medium enterprises to new markets across the African continent. We shall collaborate with the African Union Commission to leverage the AfCFTA to accelerate the implementation of the digital transformation strategy for Africa in order to transform production systems, promote industrialization, and the use of advanced technology in all sectors of the production value chain. One of the biggest constraints to cross-border trade on the African continent is the cost of transactions, which is caused by the need to convert the US dollar into a local currency before commencing a commercial or a trade transaction. This high cost of transactions discourages intra-Africa trade and sustains the fragmentation of markets in Africa. I am pleased to announce that we are collaborating very closely with Afreximbank and other stakeholders on the African continent to establish an efficient and affordable payments and settlement platform for cross-border transactions through a digitized Pan-African payments and settlement platform in order to support the implementation of the AfCFTA. By providing the requisite settlement backstop and liquidity for this payments and settlement platform, Afreximbank shall be giving practical meaning to our shared objective of an integrated market in Africa. Without an efficient and cost-effective Pan-African payments and settlement platform, the private sector will be significantly constrained in accessing new markets under the AfCFTA. We are working along with Afreximbank, we are working flat out to ensure that this digital payments and settlement platform is rolled out as soon as possible after trading has started under the AfCFTA on the 1st of January 2021. In order to maximize the benefits of the AfCFTA, it is anchored on rules of origin or local content requirements that are aimed at enhancing industrial development in Africa. The promotion of economic diversification, beneficiation, and value addition are all critical factors that will be further enhanced by the AfCFTA rules of origin regime that is almost at the point of being concluded in the negotiations. The AfCFTA rules of origin are an important tool of Africa's industrial development. The AfCFTA Secretariat will collaborate with the private sector to harness the full potential of the AfCFTA by transforming locally raw materials into value-added finished products in order to create jobs and increase the export of African manufactured products. Leveraging our rules of origin regime to advance industrial development shall require that we reinforce and provide our customs authorities with the adequate capacity to prevent transshipment of goods from third countries. A liberalized trade regime requires vigilance and an effective mechanism to prevent abuse in the form of transshipment, circumvention, and other forms of customs fraud. As I conclude, ladies and gentlemen, I would like to note that this year, 2020, is the year of silencing the guns. The implementation phase of the AfCFTA coincides with this very important milestone of silencing the guns, thereby providing an opportunity to focus on fast-tracking Africa's economic development objectives. A recent study by the World Bank estimates that where implemented properly, by the year 2035, the AfCFTA is set to lift 30 million Africans out of extreme poverty and 68 million Africans out of moderate poverty. This same study observes that the AfCFTA has the potential to increase intra-Africa trade by 81% by the year 2035. As promising and hopeful as these projections are, as Africans and as the AfCFTA Secretariat, we shall have to take concrete steps to ensure that these promising projections do actually become a reality by the year of 2035. Successful implementation of the AfCFTA shall further consolidate the gains that are foreseen in Agenda 2063, the Africa that we want, and indeed shall take us a step closer to the Africa that we want. I thank you very much for your attention. I look forward to working with you. I understand that we are now in the final stages of establishing a quarterly framework, AfCFTA and Canada-Africa Chamber of Business quarterly forum, where we will discuss opportunities that the AfCFTA has the potential to open for Canadian investors. I look forward to further partnership with you. I thank you very much.
Thank you very much to His Excellency for those incredible insights. And as someone just commented to me who has served in very senior positions here in the Canadian government, that was an incredible roadmap to where we're going on what is the single biggest free trade deal since the advent of the World Trade Organization itself, and incredibly proud to have been a part of the process as a chamber, as was alluded to earlier at the discussions in Miami last year. And committed as we are, we stand by doing everything we can to be of support. Canada is the trusted third party on the global stage, and certainly we've seen that happen on the African continent too. I want to thank Global Affairs Canada on behalf of the entire chamber for their support, as well as in the context of the government of Canada's backing of helping with grants towards associations and think tanks that were very involved in this deal, which has brought together 55 incredible countries across the African continent. At this particular juncture, our next speaker, who will conclude this session, is Susan Namolindwa, Vice President of the Canada-Africa Chamber of Business. Many of you who are regulars at this event know that Susan needs no introduction, but she serves from Ottawa, where she also heads the Africa Trade Desk. Susan will offer some inputs as we conclude this session. Susan Namolindwa, thank you.
Thank you, Gareth, and thank you, Your Excellency, for those remarks. We would have loved to have you here in Ottawa with us, and we are hopeful that with the roadmap you have given us, we will get an opportunity to host you here, or perhaps we will be hosted in your office where it will be warmer for the next few months than it is here in Canada. The world's largest trade area since the advent of the World Trade Organization is rising to the fore in Africa. Yet with so much discussion in the West around disputes with China, it is easy to have missed this monumental geo-economic development. At the recent extraordinary summit in the African Union in Niger, free enterprise prevailed, as did the human spirit. 55 nations are officially in the new free trade area, incorporating over 1.3 billion people and a projected annual GDP of more than $3 trillion. The plan is to have 90% of the tariffs removed imminently. The nation of Niger, which played host to last year's historic summit, is a landlocked country north of Nigeria, and it ranks lowest on the UN's Human Development Index. And it has battled violence and terror, much of it from unstable neighboring countries. But not even a terror attack 125 miles away could shake the resolve of the delegates to this summit. As we, the Canada-Africa Chamber, landed at the capital city's brand new airport, the excitement was tangible. For the older generation, and I won't count myself in the older generation, I'm part of the new, the free trade deal is a combination of decades of dreams for a more integrated continent, transcending old artificial borders imposed on us arbitrarily from top down by colonial powers. As the Acton Institute has previously pointed out, intra-African trade only constitutes 18% of the continent's total trade. This is very sad, however way you look at it, especially if you compare that to the European Union, which is at 70%. The only silver lining on that is that we can only go higher, amen. And the room for improvement is great. Eager discussions from civil society on implementation of the deal began initially by addressing technical matters like standardization of rules, which is necessary given the widespread differences in regulations. I mean, this is an area of 55 countries. If you even think about Canada, I mean, as one country, we have regional differences within the provinces. So you can imagine the differences within the 55 countries. Our chamber has argued recognizing best practices in one country and applying it to others as a quick way to get up to speed. Working with groups like the Fraser Institute and others, establishing best practices from among Africa's 55 countries is much easier than reinventing the wheel. Local think tanks in Africa, such as those spread through the Atlas Network, led by our partner and closing keynote speaker, Maguette Wed, have a vital role to play, as do technical experts like the Center for Trade Policy and Law in Ottawa. The university group worked on request of the African Union towards helping with the final deal. The success of the free trade matters because capacity for human creativity, an outcome of our inherent dignity, should be freely shared and exchanged across the borders. Through the Canada-Africa Chamber of Business, we have been fortunate to personally engage with many who are committed to a prosperous African community of nations. One day, perhaps, and I'm hoping that day is soon, we may indeed see a free trade deal, even between Canada and the single unified market of Africa. Today, we know how to work out technicalities of free trade deals. Africans have been doing this already at a regional level, and I would dare say successfully. But the enduring element of free trade and liberty lies within why we make the case for it. And that is doing it right, doing the right thing for the right reasons. As free trade is under strain elsewhere in the parts of the world, the seeds planted in Africa, fertilized by the energy of the new generation, are coming to fruition. Over 1 billion free people, not simply free markets, are surely the firmest foundation for an enduring African continental free trade agreement. Canada is a trusted party and has played a significant role in the formulation on invitation by African leaders. Canada can do the same for implementation, to which at the Canada-Africa Chamber we are committed. And we are here and willing, and our hands are open, and we are, I don't want to preach, but we are ready to work. For the two countries, Canada is not a continent, but for the country and the continent that we love and respect. The quarterly engagement between the Chamber and the African Union that Your Excellency has just announced will yield great fruit for an incredible market going for over 1.3 billion people as the globe shifts southward and Canada's profile and star rises. The great trusted partner in this monumental shift for Africa is Canada. And at the Chamber, again, I will reiterate, for myself, for my chair of the board and my president and vice president and the whole board, we are excited and we are so looking forward to rolling our sleeves up and getting to work. Thank you.
Vice President Namolindwa, thank you so much. I actually had forgotten my notes. I just walked up mesmerized, but what a wonderful message. And indeed, that one you deliver on behalf of all of us at the Chamber. We stand committed and proud of our position here in Canada in advancing this incredible shift that we've seen, indeed a geopolitical shift, as you alluded to, in trade for the world's 1.3 billion Africans and all of those across the diaspora. And certainly Canada's partnership, again, cannot be understated, as well as its role, not just as an expertise, but as a partner invited in based on trust and Canadian values, which have been so critical on the global stage and so welcomed in Africa. So thank you so much to all who have been involved in this incredible, incredible effort. And certainly now implementation is key, and we are ready to do the work, and so much has already been done, far surpassing expectations of and timelines that characterized other free trade deals globally. At this particular juncture, we're now going to get into some of the private sector discussion as we welcome up our first panel for day 3 of the conference. And kicking off the panel, we've got another all-star lineup of speakers. Joining us starting in Botswana is Nasim Lari of Lucara Diamond, and she'll be addressing us on the topic of interacting digitally and transacting in this new African Union single market context to which we're working. We'll look at some of the latest innovations, particularly from Lucara, when it comes to diamonds and transactions and trading in diamonds, but also beyond that. We've then got our next speaker, who is our incredible sponsor, and indeed you've seen their brand if you're logged on virtually, as well as here joining us at our venues, Bianca Pishola, who is from Canada and joining us live in Toronto. She's a founder of Six, company that's been such a support throughout these 3 days. And then we'll go on to Joanne Liebert, who's going to be discussing some of the issues around tracing the ethics and the roots of diamonds as part of ensuring a countering of corruption and crime. So technology is certainly delivering incredibly across the continent, and we have 3 wonderful practitioners here to describe exactly how that's being done. I'm going to start for those who weren't able to join us yesterday. I think we've got about 100 attendees who are new and did not hear from Nasim Lari. She is an accomplished professional accountant with a master's in strategic management and more than 17 years of experience in the diamond mining industry. 10 of those were spent in corporate finance at Debswana. She served on the board and as a member of the Debswana Pension Fund, Botswana's Accountancy College, and Pula Medical Aid. Lari is currently the director on the board of First National Bank, declared the leading bank in Botswana, which is no small feat given Botswana is the leading jurisdiction, as we've heard. Ms. Lari has served as Boteti's CFO and director since March 2013, responsible for finance, administration, and security. In 2018, she was promoted to managing director of the great Canadian company Lucara Diamond, being the first woman and the first Botswana woman to serve in this capacity for a diamond mining company in Botswana. Ladies and gentlemen, Nasim Lari joining us live from Botswana.
Thank you very much, Gareth, for all those lovely words. Always introducing me at the highest level. Thank you for that. And again, I'm blushing today, as I did yesterday. Welcome, everybody, and for everyone that's here in Canada and everywhere in the world, Dumelang Bagaetso. I'm going to take Jacques' note today and welcome you in Botswana. And this is the way we do it in Botswana. So today I have the pleasure of not talking to you specifically about the mine, but talking to you about diamond sales. And as I talk to you about diamond sales, I'd like to take everybody through a Diamond 101 class and explain to everybody how diamonds are actually sold currently in the world before Clara was introduced. So as we sell diamonds today in a normal tender process, we sell to people that we call clients or site holders. And when we do that, we sell our diamonds in lots. And when we sell the diamonds in lots, what we do is we combine similar diamonds together and we put them in a box and we sell them. This is how we've been doing them for many years, ever since diamonds have been sold. I don't know how many centuries this has been, but for hundreds of years, this is the way diamonds have been sold. So how Clara comes in, and I'm going to explain to you the structure of Clara at the moment. So, or how does Lucara Botswana interact with Clara? So Lucara Diamond, the company that owns Lucara Botswana, actually owns Clara Diamond Solutions. And this is the first solution or technology of its kind in the diamond industry that has been introduced. Yesterday, for those who listen to us, we always bring in the first autogenous mill in Africa, first XRT in the world. So we're known for bringing in the first, right? So this technology here has shaken up the diamond industry. And why I say that is because it is blockchain linked to a sales platform. Why blockchain? And currently in this world, we all know that blockchain actually provides an audit trail of where the diamonds come from. So we're able to tell exactly where the diamonds come from, which lobe in the operation that the diamonds come from, all the way to sale. And obviously, blockchain right now, from a provenance perspective, especially looking at the type of customers we have, at the beginning of this year, the millennials were the largest diamond or consumers, let me backtrack a bit, not consumers per se, but the largest buying power in the world. So when you look at that, the millennials are those people that want to know about provenance and want to know where their diamonds come from and how they were mined, and they want to link it to ethical practices. And as you've heard, we are a sustainable miner from yesterday's discussions. So how does Clara help us to achieve that? Because we have blockchain, we are able to trace the stone all the way into the pit to exactly where the stone was mined. And because we can do that, provenance is very key. And because it's very key, Clara is the solution for us, because we are able to tell where the diamonds are coming from. And then obviously we attach it to a sales platform. And again, I'm going to backtrack a bit. During COVID-19, when we started experiencing the pandemic and the lockdowns and travel restrictions and those type of things, the one thing that worked for us as Lucara Botswana in our sales was Clara, specifically because it's an online platform where you can purchase your stones. And the traditional tender process fell flat to the ground, specifically because the diamonds weren't able to get out of the country. Luckily for us in Botswana, we were able to get the diamonds out. But everywhere else in the world, they were stuck in the producing countries. But nevertheless, let me get back to Clara, because now I'm talking about Lucara Botswana, right? So let's get back to Clara. In terms of Clara, what Clara does for us that the current tender process does not do for us, you're able to purchase a stone by stone. So basically what happens is this system or solution is the future of the rough diamond marketplace. That we need to understand, specifically because it's an online platform. And why Clara? Why do we say Clara? Before we got into Clara, we were batching. We were batching stones where customers were purchasing stones that they actually didn't want, but because they wanted 80% of the stones in that batch, they were purchasing the entire box. So what happens to that is we are locking in working capital for the financial people out there. there's a lot of working capital tied in for the 20% that you don't want. Clara eliminates that. How do we do that? So Clara, what it does is we use a system called Serene. And Serene, how Serene works is it prices your diamonds from polished all the way to rough. So you get the optimal value of each stone that you're selling. And we sell our stones not in batches, but we sell them stone by stone. So what do you do with Clara? A client will come in, put in their price, and as they put in their price into the system, we will also have our price for our stone as a producer. We put in our optimal price, looking at the market conditions out there and what is happening for that particular stone. We use Serene specifically because it will price the diamond to polished and back to what the optimal price of that rough is going to be. It cuts out the middleman, and in doing that, you have a higher purchase price that you would get when you settle the deal. And the deal is actually settled on a matching concept. And this matching concept, how it works is that it's not like a tender where you put in a reserve price. A customer or client will put in their price. There's algorithms in the back that will work in, and they will match that product. So there's no human intervention. There's no way that collusion could happen as it would normally happen well, I wouldn't say normally, but there's a potential of collusion happening in a tender. It eliminates that whole process. So the way Clara will work is that the client will put in their price, producer puts in their price, and they match. And the good part about Clara is that you're able to sell each stone individually. So you're not locked in to purchase a stone that you don't want. You get exactly what you want. And because you get exactly what you want, you have free cash flow in terms of the fact that you don't have any capital locked in. So from a financial perspective, this is really great for the diamond industry. Again, with COVID-19 coming on board, we were able to sell diamonds, obviously without transporting them out of the country, but we were able to sell diamonds. So from a cash flow perspective, we were not cash strapped in terms of diamond sales. And again, the way we run our sales at Lucara Botswana, digressing a bit from Clara, is that we have three options of sales. We actually have a polished channel that we're selling at. We do rough on tender, which is done in Antwerp at the moment because of COVID, which we used to do here in Botswana. And we've got Clara. So during the pandemic or the lockdowns that we're talking about, Clara was still ongoing. We never stopped selling on Clara. So Clara, in fact, was a godsend. It has rocked the diamond world because people still don't understand what's going on, because we are all locked into this traditional way of selling diamonds. But with Clara, you're able to match your stones and actually do the sale from office. If you want to understand what that stone is about, you're able to see it on the system. The system will show you exactly what is the optimal value of that stone so that you can set the optimal purchase or selling price for the producer, right? Again, it creates a platform for customers that have bought in these lots or boxes that we talk about. It creates a platform for them where they're able to take the stones that they don't want and free up their working capital. They're able to push it through the system, obviously taking into account provenance. Provenance is very key for us, Kimberley process certification as well. So once the provenance has been identified, you're able to take in your diamonds that you have bought elsewhere, push it through to the system, and ensure that you get the optimal price for whatever an individual wants out there. And there's a buyer for every single diamond. So bottom line is, what we do is we sell a single stone at a time. And what does it do at the end of the day? At the end of the day, you get the optimal price for whatever you're putting through the system. You don't have a middleman anymore. So from a buyer's perspective, you have access to global supply. We would have many producers on the system, so you have access to global supply. You order what you want. It's not a push system. You're able to manage what stones you want and when you want them. So you're able to manage your production line efficiently. So there's no lockup in your production line. So it adds to efficiency. And like I said, because it adds to efficiency, you order what you want. You order from where you want. That's a great thing, because you're able to order from many producers. Again, what does Clara do for us? Financials. It eliminates that financial carrying cost, the working capital that I talked about. And it normalizes your production cycle, which I've talked about already. For the sellers, you get the maximum selling price. For the government officials that are sitting here, you get the maximum royalties out of it. So what I'd like to show about Clara, unfortunately, my presentations are actually up there. I didn't see that, sorry. Anyways, what I'd like to show about Clara, if Gareth, if you can get to the slide where we've got the graph, maybe that'll work. Yes. So this slide here actually shows you what you'd be able to obtain if you were purchasing off Clara. So you'd get your best value sitting at 15%. And we've done simulations with 3 manufacturers at the time that we launched Clara. And looking at the time that we launched Clara with those 3 manufacturers, the actual price that was put onto the system wasn't too far off from each other. So it shows you that the system does actually work in terms of what we put onto the system versus what somebody is willing to bid. There are times where clients actually complain that they're unable to win the bid. And the reason that they're unable to win the bid is specifically because they haven't put in the right pricing. So we would guide them to show them where the market is sitting. And maybe it's because of the market dynamics that they do not understand. And because they don't understand that, it makes it difficult for them to win that bid. But once they get the education around it, you see those individuals or those clients actually benefiting from the process of Clara. So I think I've covered the next slides I've covered. So maybe just, if you can just get to the front page of Clara, please, if you don't mind. So I think from an industry outlook perspective, we want transparency, and Clara is creating transparency. It creates a healthy environment for both the consumer or purchaser and the seller. And in addition to that, we are changing the way diamonds are sold. It's a system which is changing for the betterment of the diamond industry. With COVID coming on board, we are now digital. We are able to show people that you can purchase diamonds online without actually having any fuss around coming through to Botswana. Obviously, we'd want you here eventually, but at the moment, if you're unable to come through Botswana, you're able to purchase your diamonds off Clara, and you're able to get the best possible price, whether you're pushing your diamonds onto our system or whether you're purchasing your diamonds off the, purchasing your diamonds off the system. So all we're trying to say is you will get the best possible price wherever you're sitting. Whether you're a customer that is purchasing and pushing your diamonds onto our system, or whether you're a seller that is trying to sell goods from our system. So we are eliminating that middleman, and by doing that, we are creating value, we are creating efficiencies on the system, and again, we are creating a happy seller, a happy buyer. And why do we want to do that, right? Specifically looking at where the industry is going and where our consumers are going. Our consumers are very worried about provenance. Where do the diamonds come from? What have the diamonds done for the countries that they've been extracted from? All these things here are able to be tracked through the system of Clara. It's a blockchain process with a sales platform at the end of it. So as I talk about the millennials, these are the people that have the highest purchasing power as we see it at the beginning of the year. So what better system to use than Clara, where we're using blockchain, we're able to track where the diamonds are coming from, and we're able to sell and ensure that the financial benefits are accrued to both parties, being the buyers and the sellers. With that, thank you very much for listening. And thank you, Canada.
Thank you very much, Naseem Lari. Absolutely fantastic presentation, and incredible to see private sector in action, trading and transacting already using technology and overcoming any geographical challenges that may exist, particularly given the time we're in right now. Well, another company doing exactly that is SIX, a capital markets technology platform that is a key sponsor as well of this event over these 3 days. It's my great pleasure to welcome up Bianca Pisciola, who's the founding chief operating officer at SIX. Through the company, she's deployed data-driven investor relations technology for more than 100 publicly listed mining companies. Bianca is on the founding team of Save Canadian Mining, an advocacy group dedicated to reinstating the tick test within Canadian capital markets. Other members of the founding team include Eric Sprott, Rob McEwen, and numerous captains of industry based in Canada's mining sector. And in fact, SIX has been a great partner this year at our annual breakfast during PDAC, the largest event on mining in North America that's Africa-focused. They came on board and live streamed that event, which included Mark Bristow, CEO of Barrick Gold, who gave the keynote address alongside numerous ministers from Canada and Africa. Bianca is also committed in philanthropy, where she serves on the One Silver Lining Board, a Canadian nonprofit which she founded, supporting youth through conferences, young people through benefit concerts, as well as TEDx talks and scholarships. Bianca Pisciola, welcome to the stage.
Thank you. That was so kind. To kick things off, I'd like to extend a few words of thanks. Thank you to Gareth, to Sebastian, and to everyone in the chamber for allowing us to take part in such a momentous event. It gives me a tremendous amount of pride to be able to power the digital arm of Africa Accelerating. And as such, I would be remiss if I didn't also thank the SIX team, who have been so instrumental in allowing this to go on so smoothly. Special thanks goes to Jane and also to Jay. They have been absolutely critical in these last 3 days. And then a final word of thanks to everyone who is attending live globally, hundreds of you all over the world. Big thank you for everyone participating. So to kick things off, I want to talk to you a little bit about what I've seen as the major shift in capital markets, in the private industry, and how the world is moving digitally. For a very long time, investments in Africa have been made by the people who have actually gone there. There have been people who have been able to see the opportunity with their own eyes. And as a result, this has limited the number of people who understand the opportunity for Africa. And now in our COVID-19 world, it's harder and harder for investors who travel to see it with their own eyes and to gain that understanding. COVID-19, in addition, has created historic levels of uncertainty from an economic perspective. The fallout from zeroed interest rates, trillions of dollars of money being printed, and massive stimulus spending will be with us for years to come. Markets are in chaos and the rules of the game are changing, but out of crisis comes opportunity. As investors reevaluate their investment thesis, there is an opportunity for African businesses to come out ahead. To understand the opportunity a little bit better, we need to understand where we've come from. In the old world, investors were forced to rely on broker-dealers and financial advisors to execute trades for them. They paid high transaction fees and used expensive terminals, and the process was exceedingly slow. Global opportunities in Africa and beyond were not recommended by your broker or your advisor because they didn't have a relationship with those teams, and so those companies never made it onto their Rolodex. However, investors today are more self-directed than ever before. They do their own research, they leverage the advice of others in their decision-making, and they make a decision to participate at any company, at any time, anywhere. With a click of a button, from their mobile, tablet, or desktop device, investors can choose to embrace a company's future or to abandon it. This shift in investor behavior is significant because right now there are more than 300 million people who participate in self-directed investing in a universe of only 100,000 global public companies. There is an opportunity here for those who can capture it. Africa is already an attractive investment opportunity. You all know this. The population is booming, innovation is happening, and there's already 438 companies in Africa generating over $1 billion per year. So from a valuation standpoint, Africa is a very attractive investment opportunity for global investors. But Africa has wealth and also understands how to spot their own opportunities. Capital will not just flow into Africa, but will flow within Africa, enabling opportunities for the continent and for the people within it, which is expected to total 4.3 billion, or 1/4 of the world's population by 2050. All of these forces are positioning Africa for a catalyst moment, and now whether or not the catalyst moment will be good or bad is defined, in my personal opinion, by 3 core things. First is the ability to access capital. Second is coverage of African companies. And then finally, it's the ability to create a community of local and global investors. When it comes to accessing capital, it will come from the next generation investor. And this next generation investor, they will find you online. From investment forums to social networks to crowdsourced research platforms, there is no shortage of resources where investors can discover and discuss investment opportunities. In today's world of 24/7 news cycles and polarization, the flavor of the day is increasingly to be negative. It's no surprise then that most companies choose to abstain from the digital conversation altogether while focusing on the hard work of developing their company in an effort to produce the next catalyst event. The problem with this strategy, however, is that when that next catalyst event does happen, after years or decades of hard work, you don't have the audience familiar enough with your company to understand the broader context, and new investors that see the news and begin their research process are deterred by all the ongoing negative conversations and therefore hold off making an investment. As a result, your catalyst event doesn't unlock the full value of your progress. But today, it doesn't need to be that way. Connecting with investors at the exact moment where they're considering to invest their money is now possible in the world of participatory investing. And to understand a little bit better about our thesis here, we've enabled access to capital through SIX by connecting investors who see the future with the companies building it through live, interactive, virtual summits, like the one you're all on today, hosted on the internet by video. We promote these summits through ads, social media, and email. It allows for hundreds of qualified investors to be in a room with you, eager to understand your vision for the future as they consider where to invest their money. The magic of this and the world we're now in is unlike a conference room or a stadium that can fit hundreds of people or thousands of people. Virtual investment summits, in theory, have no limit to their number of participants. As a result, your access to capital and the investors that hold it is unlimited. When it comes to creating coverage, it will come from the next generation analyst. This next generation analyst looks different than the analysts that have come before because there are zero barriers to entry for them to share their investment thoughts and ideas, and they'll be compensated by the crowd rather than by companies or by banks. The next generation analyst will be a citizen journalist, and this is already happening. You can see it on Twitter, on co.ca, on Stockhouse, and now increasingly on SIX. The SIX platform connects investors and analysts and companies all in one place. The next generation analysts are able to host their own summits, much like this one as well, sharing their unique perspectives with the existing and prospective followers. The crowd will reward the creators and the content that they find valuable. And finally, communities will be built by the next generation company. In the new world of participatory investing, in which crowds choose kings and regicide is the new normal, it's dangerous to leave crowds unattended, especially when many of them have already gathered on forums such as Stockhouse, co.ca, and many others. Rather than participating in a strategy of avoidance, the next generation company will proactively engage the crowd by inviting them to participate in building their companies. SIX invites investors to submit questions, leave feedback from management, and engage in a dialogue, conditional that they reveal their identities. And by design, we're able to identify the detractors, passives, and the promoters, measuring by a unique metric, which we call the Investor Net Promoter Score, or INPS, with an aim of generating community support. All of these trends are accelerating with COVID-19, and they need to adapt, and we need to overcome physical barriers and liquidity shortfalls. It demands a solution that enables self-directed, participatory, and decentralized investors to invest in the companies on the continent of the future. Thank you very much. Appreciate it.
Bianca, thank you so much. Just giving such life to the investment component that was outlined by Secretary General Wamkele Mene. I heard that term more than any other during his remarks, and this ability to access capital markets and connect the African opportunities and projects with Canadian capital and indeed global capital is truly phenomenal. And thank you very, very much. And our third speaker on the panel this morning or this afternoon in Botswana and across the continent is Joanne Leberg. Joanne joined Impact in 2011. She's joining us from Ottawa, where she leads the organization's work to improve how natural resources are managed, where issues of security and human rights are deemed high risk. Her work is focused on contributing to responsible, conflict-free minerals, ethically sourced, and she's helped Central African governments launch and implement a regional strategy that's tackling conflict minerals. Joanne is a policy advisor, a frequent guest speaker, a trainer to policymakers, and works with private sector representatives and a host of civil society bodies. Previously, Joanne was based at the University of Ottawa's Human Rights and Research Center. She's focused on gender-based violence there in conflict settings, and has looked at how that impacts the extractive industry and the relationship and dynamics therein. She served as Deputy Director of the Canadian nonprofit Peace Build, where she worked to strengthen Canadian foreign policy options across the world. She's carried out field work in numerous African markets and has used research studies in places like Namibia as the basis for her doctoral thesis, sharing that knowledge gleaned on the African continent with Canadian thinkers and indeed with those around the world. I believe in your resume, the University of Oxford also features where you were a visiting scholar. Joanne, a warm welcome from the nation's capital to Africa Accelerating.
Excellent. Thank you, Gareth. I hope you can hear me. Thank you to the Chamber and to the SIX team for this opportunity to meet and discuss with you virtually. I'm really honored to be with you all. I have a bit of a slide presentation that I'll go through, and I hope that you can see and follow along with me. I am going to be addressing how responsible trade can contribute to, if not leapfrog, transparency and development outcomes based on the work and experience our organization has carried out and our experiences in Africa with partners in numerous countries and with the support of the Government of Canada. So Impact is a non-profit, non-governmental organization. We've existed since 1986. We rebranded a couple of years ago. We used to be called Partnership Africa Canada. It's our organization that first drew international attention to the phenomena of blood diamonds, and we have worked in the conflict mineral space since then. Diamonds, gold, 3Ts, tin, tungsten, tantalum, and increasingly as well looking at ensuring that commodities, minerals like cobalt are responsibly produced and traded as well, commodities that are essential for the transition to the green economy. With regards to these minerals and these natural resources, we work on regulatory and legal reform, supply chain transparency, illicit trade, gender, and the environment. And as a development organization, our priority is really about advancing human rights and development in producer countries and producer communities. So I want to talk a little bit today about the Just Gold project. So not diamonds, but gold. And I'm speaking here about artisanal mining. So not large-scale mining or small-scale mining, very much about artisanal mining, which is a phenomenon that we increasingly find globally. And millions of people in Africa in particular are working in this informal sector, which is poverty-driven, but also can be poverty alleviating with the right enabling environment and with the right supports. And we believe firmly in that. And with the Government of Canada, we have executed a project called the Just Gold Project in the Democratic Republic of Congo, and now in Ivory Coast with support from the European Union. And essentially, it's an incentive-based approach to traceability, so provenance, and supply chain due diligence for responsible and legal artisanal gold from mine to market in alignment with international regional standards. And we do this using essentially an incentive-based approach. Artisanal miners and producers need to be incentivized to want to trade legally and transparently. So we offer a number of incentives, from technical assistance to supporting fiscal reform and harmonization, to access to good credit on fair terms, hence breaking their dependency on predatory lenders, access to international markets, access to inventory financing, but also better price, ideally, for their commodities, and price transparency so that they're sure they're not being cheated. Oops. And the milestones that we've achieved is in the Democratic of Congo, the DRC, over 24 kilos of responsible artisanal gold has reached the international market, involving over 1,000 artisanal miners. And that is quite a feat, considering it was a very challenging and continues to be a very challenging environment. And we want to really demonstrate how constructive engagement with the private sector and with trade in particular can lead to positive development and security dividends. And we've had active partnerships with Canadian companies, notably Fairtrade Jewelry Company, who's a company in Toronto, who sourced some of that gold to produce some of the beautiful jewelry you see there. And what is, I think, quite innovative about this approach and this brand in particular is that it's defined by the data and the robustness of the data that accompanies the commodity. And so at the end of fair trade and all along the supply chain, it's not a certificate or a label that's reassuring. It's essentially the data that accompanies the product that reassures consumers and buyers that what they are purchasing is not only conflict-free and responsible, but actually leading to development and security dividends that are beneficial for everybody. So when we talk about data, we talk about 3 buckets of data that accompany the commodity. And again, in this case, it's gold, but it could be diamonds or other commodities mined by artisanal miners. So there's provenance, obviously, that's where it comes from and all related transactions. There's due diligence, which we use the OECD minerals guidance for due diligence applicable to the private sector. And that means about really understanding, documenting in real time and updating regularly the context and the conditions under which a commodity has been mined and traded. So you see the risks that are of particular concerns to consumers and buyers, and the types of information that has to be provided, collected, and shared in a transparent sort of way for that confidence to be instilled and for the market to engage on an ongoing basis. And then the third type of data that we collect is essentially sustainable development goals data, so development data. And you see some of the examples of the SDGs at the bottom for which, we work with our local partners, local civil society actors, and local researchers to collect this data using advanced monitoring and evaluation essentially methodologies and academic essentially methodologies as well. So what we do is we overlay, the data around provenance, the data around the context, and the data around development, so that we know that we're not only supporting responsible sourcing, but that responsible business conduct and engagement is actually not only not doing harm, but actually contributing to development dividends. So I'm just going to, go through this very quickly, just to give you an idea, flavor of how this data essentially gets represented for the communities, ideally for the governments as well, but especially for the buyers, so they know they're actually contributing to development. So we have, statistics around increased food security, increased economic resilience, and on and on. There are many examples of this, but I think this one is particularly compelling because it speaks to the importance of robust data and the importance of robust data that we can use to improve the way we engage, to ensure we maximize benefits for everybody. I think there's a prevailing assumption that some sourcing responsibly is going to be beneficial for everyone, when in reality, the communities are uneven, like they are in all society. Not everybody is in an equal position of power or in a position to benefit. And we see this repeatedly when it comes to gender equality. So men in the supply chain, even at a mine site, even if they're performing the same role as a woman, tend to be more remunerated, or at least benefit more from responsible business conduct and responsible sourcing than women. And so when we first implemented the Just Gold project, our data analytics were telling us that because men's incomes were increasing, but not women's necessarily, we were inadvertently contributing to gender inequality, which is totally, against what our organization stands for. We're a feminist organization committed to women's empowerment. And so it was quite shocking to have the evidence show us that women were not benefiting like men through constructive engagement with trade and the market. And so we rapidly, based on that information and with our partners, introduced a number of measures at the local level to support women's access to pits, equal access to equipment, equal price policy, so they would be paid the same as men, supporting their formation of local associations, their equal division of labor, greater participation of cooperatives, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. And then the data was showing us over time, and this is a composite index of women's empowerment, one that we've borrowed from USAID. We see, their access to assets, their income, their leadership role, their production, et cetera, increased over time. So this is why this data is extremely valuable and important, both for the private sector who is buying the material, but also for development practitioners and donors and the governments and the local communities who want to know whether or not we're moving in the right direction and essentially realizing the SDGs. And I want to reiterate for the private sector, there's a kind of tipping point at the moment where we see many private sector actors who really want to go beyond risk monitoring and risk mitigation in supply chains to really contributing to doing good. And so this is the kind of tool that kind of enables us to do this. this is just an example of the type of dashboard or how that information can be made available. There's a livelihood index, there's women's empowerment index. And just if I can step back for a minute, when measuring the SDGs, we borrow from a number of internationally recognized indexes that we then have applied and adapted to the local context and tested with artisanal mining communities. So it allows us to use the same indicators, the same indexes at the local level as they are at the national level, as they are in the international level. And the information collected essentially rolls up and allows us to compare apples to apples. Indexes such as USAID's Women's Empowerment Index, a Women, Peace and Security Index developed by Georgetown University, Social Progress Index developed by the Social Progress Imperative, Sustainable Livelihoods Index developed by DFID, etc. So these are the indexes that we borrow from to adapt locally to the local reality in order to help us measure whether or not business and responsible business conduct and trade is helping us realize those development objectives that we're endeavoring to realize together as a global community. As far as next steps are concerned, or how we've taken this system and taken it to the next level, we're adapting it to Côte d'Ivoire, as I mentioned, with the support of the European Union. An LBMA-listed refiner has already signed a commercial agreement with the exporter and the artisanal mining cooperative, which will allow essentially that data to start flowing with the commodity and laying the groundwork for scale. But also, I think more excitedly, or what's more exciting for us, is this notion of ethical data exchange. And I've heard it this morning already in several of the comments, where data and information and assurance has a value. And a lot of the, I think, push towards that, however positive, has perhaps failed to recognize or compensate in many forms the communities and the individuals who are providing that data. The data that goes onto platforms, the data that the private sector needs, the data we need to know whether or not we're improving development and security goals, starts with the individuals and the communities that we're working with. So how do we ensure that collecting that data is not only robust, but essentially that it's valued and that it is recognized and acknowledged as for the value it holds, and that it essentially goes back to contribute to those communities, that we're not just there essentially sucking up the data and that they're not getting anything in return. So we've partnered with another NGO called Solidaridad, has very similar values to our own, but has worked primarily in the agricultural sector and throughout Africa. And we're now essentially working together on this notion of ethical data exchange to take it to the next level. And so we're working to design a platform that takes all those data analytics that I talked about, the provenance, the context, and the development data, and essentially turns it into incentives, new incentives for communities to support improvements in these communities, to support kinds of behavioral changes and increased capacity, essentially closing the loop. So what does this look like in practice? Well, the customer, like a refiner or like a large end user like Apple or Google, who wants to use this information and wants to have access in order to make sure that their supply chains are clean, they essentially benefit from those insights and from that data, but they also can invest in a reward system and invest in the community. So they invest for access to that data back in the community. The miner, who is also on the same platform, so everybody's on the platform together, all the supply chain actors from end user to the miner, they can also access tailored information on that platform to improve mining practices and essentially, work plans and support for financial literacy and capacity building, et cetera. But every time they contribute verifiable data, they unlock potential rewards. They can get access to services, they can get access to equipment, and essentially nudge behavioral change towards certain improvements. For example, the reduction of mercury or improved environmental practices, or ideally, perhaps even rewarding steps towards gender equality or other sort of development, social and economic progress indicators. So this at the moment is in development. This is the next phase of taking this kind of assurance mechanism based on robust data that marries trade with aid together. It's at the next level, and we've already kind of secured support from Apple, from Google, from Microsoft, and from Coppermart, and many others who are really wanting to essentially step up their commitment as global enterprises to not only access data to ensure that their supply chains are clean, but really to invest it in good and to improve conditions and security and development dividends. And we've now partnering as well with SAP as they're investing some of the technology to help us take this to the next level and make it operational and scalable, not just in gold, but in other materials and minerals involving micro producers and artisanal miners. And it would be great to get Canadian investors on board as well, so that this information, this platform can be available to Canadian and obviously African supply chain actors. So I will leave it at that, and I hope there will be questions. So thank you very much for this opportunity again, and I'm more than happy to share the presentation with you, and I look forward to follow-up exchanges. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Joanne. And certainly there are questions coming through. I'm going to post the questions in the order of the speakers, and I think that might be easiest. I'll do a round of questions with one each, and starting then with Nasim. Nasim, the question goes to the issue of mining companies tending to be very conservative. What internal systems at Lucara do you think enable the sorts of innovations that you've described, which have totally changed the way diamond trading is taking place, not just specific to mining, but in fact the whole industry value chain? The second question goes to Bianca, and it relates to the fact that you are a relatively early stage company, of course, growing very quickly. What has been the most interesting misconception in your view among established companies and CEOs when it comes to moving into this space? You've got 100 listed companies already. Many more are joining quickly, but of course there are thousands out there. So any thoughts around that would be fantastic. That actually comes from a investor relations director at one of the firms watching. And then Joanne, a question around policy goes to you on the issue particularly of open data. Would you say a lack of open data policies in certain countries hinders your ability at data collection? Or are there other policy issues as well, which technology itself cannot overcome? It will require a bit of an enabling environment from legislators. And just a lot of great comments to each of you, just congratulating you on this incredible work. Nasim, I'll hand over to you to tackle the first question. Thank you.
Thank you, Gareth. Thank you for the question. I think the answer is a very simple one. Generally, I think even the management team that are sitting here is that we've got a great board that listens, and we're generally not a risk-averse company. So we like taking risks, and because we take those risks, we see the benefits of those risks. We're a very open-minded team as well. Whatever ideas come through, we listen, we understand, and if they're great for the organization, we implement. So I think what you need to look at with the Lucara Botswana team, and generally just Lucara Diamond, is that we're a very small and focused team. And decision making doesn't take a very long time. And I think it is quite key for organizations out there in terms of the decision making process. In very bureaucratic companies, you get decision making taking a very, very long time to take place, and therefore you lose opportunity. In our setup, we don't lose any opportunities. We actually see the opportunities, we grab, and we literally run with those opportunities. And I think that's why you're seeing Lucara Botswana in the front line with technology all the way, whether it be from a processing perspective, whether it be from a sales perspective, and even financial. I mean, there's a lot of other innovative ideas that have come through from all the departments within our organization. I mean, if you look at the corporate social investment activities that we have as well, they're not tied to innovation, but I mean, technology per se, but there's a lot of innovation in the way we actually carry those out to the communities. If you look at the processing plant, it's about the technology, it's about technology and sales. So generally, without belaboring the question too much or taking too long to answer it, I think it's all about the mindset of the management team that runs the organization and the leadership at the board levels as well. For as long as we're able to make the decisions at the right time and quickly, you will win in many areas of your business, and you'll be able to get traction in all areas of your business. And what that means is a bigger profit line. Hopefully post-COVID-19, we'll all be talking about that. Right now, it's a bit slim, but I think prior to that, that's what we see, right? But bottom line is, I think, you know, just the way ideas are taken on and the risks that we're able to take, and calculated risks, right? We're not going to take risks to the detriment of our organization, the people in the organization, and obviously the safety. But those risks that we take from a technology perspective or even innovation, it's all because we have good leadership and good turnaround on decision making. Thank you very much. The people in the organization and obviously the safety.
Fantastic. Bianca.
Yeah, no, that's a great question. So insofar as the primary misconceptions that I see CEOs and management making at these public companies regards to the shift that we're seeing towards digital and the digital transformation of capital markets, there's a few common threads. The first thread, I think, is that it's too dangerous to engage with because, as I mentioned during my talk, they have a perspective that it's overwhelmingly negative. But I think what's missed in that is that the conversation is in large part negative because of the fear that investors have that the company is not acting in their best interest, that they don't care. And not participating in that conversation, I think, only fuels that fear. It doesn't negate it. So that's the first bit of the puzzle. I think the second bit of the puzzle is that a lot of folks believe that it's a chicken and egg thing where I need to have a catalyst event in order to warrant going online and engaging investors digitally, when in fact it's the opposite. You need to engage investors digitally in order to build the audience, to create momentum behind that catalyst event. And I think that that's one bit of that people tend to misconceive. I guess the final bit that I see is that this is something that is not right for them, or not right for capital markets and not right for public companies, that this is something that is regulated only to lifestyle brands and Instagram pop-up shops. And that couldn't be farther from the truth. When you think about your average self-directed investor, they are looking at all channels. They are doing their digital due diligence. They are trying to understand who your company is, but more often than not, they're trying to understand who you are. And that comes from all channels. And it's imperative that you are active there, that you are present there, and that you're able to tell your story to them in all of these mediums. So that's what I see.
Thank you very much, Bianca. And over to Ottawa, Joanne, on the question of prospective policy gaps. Your thoughts?
Yeah, I mean, maybe to take it a bit a step back. I mean, the notion of the kind of the digital platform where all the actors in the supply chain, including the smallest producer, is on that platform is about equity first and foremost. So it's about an equitable marketplace, an equitable digital marketplace where they participate fully. And so being committed to that first mile and first mile empowerment of those communities, any notion of open data starts first and foremost with their consent. They own the data, they consent to it. They have to understand what open data means and the implications, and they are at the helm of it. So it's really, those discussions are actually related to capacity building at the community level in partnership with the government. It's a capacity building approach to responsible trade for them to be, active participants and right bearers of their own data and the commodities that they trade. However, we need a conducive policy environment, regulatory environment in these communities and these countries. And in spite of the fact that there are 42 million artisanal miners, 30% of which are women globally, and countries like Congo have 2 million artisanal miners. Burkina Faso has 1 million. Zimbabwe has 1 million. And they're informal and largely in the shadow economy. We want to bring them out of formality, but in order for them to participate and contribute to development and be secure in their communities, we need an enabling regulatory and policy environment that supports artisanal miners and not essentially criminalizes them, that sees them as contributors to economic development. And we've seen, fiscal and, tax reforms that are extremely penalizing and actually disincentivize these small producers from wanting to operate legally and transparently. It is almost impossible to compete with the illicit and informal market unless the governments are on the side of artisanal miners as citizens and actors. And so that kind of environment that is supporting artisanal miners towards formalization and recognizing them as contributors to economic development is possibly the most fundamental piece requiring, policy, I would say, coherence.
All right. Thank you very much, Joanne. First question goes back to you, and then I'll ask the questions in reverse order. So over to Bianca and then Nassim. The question relates to the role of local think tanks. You've mentioned the importance of working with communities. And of course, you've done a lot of work in training both with public and private sector leaders. How important is the voice of local individuals as advocates outside of public policy? So in terms of civil society itself, taking stands related to the regulatory environment and not just leaving it to the policymakers. The question goes to your thoughts and your key takeaways on experiences working with activists as opposed to policymakers in getting these reforms over the line.
Yes, that is a question for me, right? I just want to confirm. Yes. Yes, okay. Everything we do, and I think to be successful in this space, requires a multi-stakeholder approach. And we're obviously a civil society actor. We're an NGO. We're actually we're the civil society co-chair to the OECD Forum on Minerals. We've been technical partners to a number of ministries in Africa, as well as to a number of regional intergovernmental bodies like the ICGLR and a number of others. But civil society is a key pillar of that. And so the type of, I think, the robust analysis and data and is fundamental to advancing regulatory reform, supply chain transparency, because these are highly technical issues. And civil society needs access to this technical information in order to, argue for, fiscal reform or harmonization of laws, regulations across borders that is actually grounded on data and is grounded on best practice and evidence from, from the kind of analytics or from other country and regional contexts. And there is a growing body of expertise and evidence. And civil society is very much a driver of that. And I'm not talking about international civil society. I'm talking about local civil society and local community-based actors who are very much a part of this and that we work together with. So I think there is a growing recognition that civil society is bringing a lot of expertise to this. The data helps shore up, of course, their advocacy and policy positions, but the solutions really require collaboration with the private sector and governments in order to enact the right reforms.
Your work with junior mining companies, have you seen particular challenges that junior companies are facing in the digital environment that sort of is parallel to the kinds of issues junior companies have traditionally faced in trying to get investors on board? What's the sort of correlation, or are we proportionally seeing far greater success for the junior companies now as they do these roadshows online and use your sort of technology to target very specific prospective investors?
Yeah, that's a great question. I mean, I think at core, these junior mining companies are experiencing similar problems even online, but the solutions, I think, are novel. So an example of which is there's always a need for local support, and there's a need for local buy-in in the communities that your project are adjacent to. And what we're seeing now, and actually something that we're working on increasingly with our companies, is that folks are, even this COVID-19 environment, not deciding to forego those community relations, but instead those conversations are moving online. So an example of that is one of the junior mining companies that we're working with right now has a community, and they're hosting a town hall virtually as an investor summit where anyone from that community can participate, ask questions, and in that way they feel deeply connected to the company in a way that would previously only be possible face to face. In terms of other problems that we're seeing these junior miners face, there's always that fear that if you stay dormant and you stay silent for too long, investors will go on and find a different opportunity. And by and large, that is still the case. But through mediums like the ones that we're deploying, we're able to enable these companies to have more frequent communications with these companies and create what is in essence a cadence of communication. One of the things I said earlier around not participating in public forums is that these investors fear the companies don't care, they're not listening to them. And a lot of that is due to poor expectation management. They have no concept as to when they can hear from management again. And as such, it just becomes this nebulous, scary thing. But what we're seeing now is that COVID-19 and everyone working from home has allowed folks to create a more consistent schedule, ironically enough, where you can plan on having a monthly opportunity to connect with your investors, or a quarterly opportunity, or whatever is appropriate. And in that way, it's created more structure in the lives of investors. And I think the consequence of that is an investor base that is much more positive, even despite this economic uncertainty, because they know, in essence, what they can expect from these junior management teams.
Bianca, just a quick follow-up question that I thought I would lump in with this one. Many people speak about investors and they think about those who have enormous amounts of money. But of course, there are many professionals, working professionals, who do have some liquid cash and they'd like to invest directly. Could you talk to just through some of your viewpoints on how this is empowering people to gain access to investments that previously only very large private equity players were seeing, particularly for the African investors, because of course there's so much capital on the continent too that could come into Canadian firms as well as fellow African firms?
Yeah, no, I think the retail investor, the individual with their own capital to deploy in smaller amounts than institutionals or accredited investors, they are instrumental in building up both Canadian and African companies. I think that insofar as what we're seeing more and more is we're seeing that the definition of investor is broadening to include more and more people. I know in our presentation earlier today, there was a lot of mention to the millennial investor. And as a millennial investor myself, I'm seeing a lot of my peers having liquid capital for the first time ever and wanting to understand where to deploy that. And so it's more important than ever to tell these stories on a global stage, both the stories of African companies to global investors, the story of Canadian companies to African investors, and so on, because the traditional definition of investor no longer applies. It is impossible to tell where your next check is coming from, where that next order is coming from. And as such, creating a larger community is more important than ever. And what's more, the one big similarity I'm seeing among investors in the retail space is that they talk to each other in a way that we don't see with other investor types. They recommend deals to their peers. And as a result, it's important to win their hearts and minds, because it's not just you winning their heart and their mind, you're winning their entire ecosystem. And so right now, that retail investor is absolutely critical, both for Canadian companies, African investors, Canadian investors, global investors. So yes, that's a really, really important cohort for sure.
Excellent. Thank you very much, Bianca. Over to Botswana for a question to Nassim. And this ties into some of the discussion that Joanne was raising on issues of policy. How do you, as a large Canadian mining company, engage in questions of policy and the sort of creation of the kind of environment that Botswana has, ranked number 1 with the Fraser Institute Mining Index? The question goes to how you keep that separate line, Nassim, between being seen to lobby specifically for your company and demonstrating, in fact, that you're focused on creating an enabling environment for all companies. No doubt the fact that you're a local Botswana does help. But any thoughts around that? And this comes from, again, a Canadian mining representative who's involved in some public policy engagement here in Canada.
Thank you for the question, and a very good question, I may add. As I mentioned yesterday in my discussions, the government of Botswana actually doesn't frustrate, they facilitate, and they generally don't only talk to the companies that they own or where they have influence. They talk to absolutely everybody in any policy change that they have, Recently, we had a discussion around the mining, and I'm not saying it because our minister is sitting here, just to make that clear, but we had a discussion around, actually, yesterday and a week ago or 2 weeks ago, we had a discussion the Mining Act. And what's important about Botswana in terms of policy changes and that is they don't push the policies on you. They actually consult and see what best practice is about, consult the practical aspects of policy and how it's going to impact, whether it be the private sector or the public sector as well. And remember, there are certain entities where the government is actually involved in those entities. So they've got to represent both the private and companies that they own as well. So it's quite important to understand that the dynamics that we are in Botswana may be very different to the other countries in the world, specifically because there's a lot of approach of consultation here in Botswana. We are always consulted when there's changes. I mean, recently, like I talked about the Mining Act, there were a couple of changes around beneficiation, there were a couple of changes around reclamation as well. And we were consulted as the private industry, and there were a lot of government people in that discussion. And it's not seen as though we are trying to push a private sector agenda across. We sit at a table and there's a lot of consultation that happens. And I think generally the culture of Botswana is we sit in a kotla and we consult and we come up with the best possible solution and the individuals in the country. And I think that's a very good working solution for any country. And that has been adopted to the government level. And it makes it easier for the private sector as well to get involved in the policy changes that are occurring. And we are always consulted. Sometimes it may not benefit us 100%, but they'll try and meet us halfway. Look, I think the government also has to run a country. They can't always make us happy as a private sector. But I think we always find a middle ground to ensure that whatever happens, it's for the benefit of the people. And it's not about the private sector alone. It's about the people of Botswana and the country as well. And I think that always helps. And in short, there is a lot of consultation, and we always benefit from that consultation, and we're always heard. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much, Nasim. A similar question being posed to you, Bianca. It's noted that you're involved in the campaign Save Canadian Mining. The question is did you ever deem it risky as an early stage company to throw yourself into the contentious world of public policy? And what do you advise of other startups who are looking at possibly doing the same, who believe there's a need for some level of regulatory reform? Your personal experience.
Okay, fair enough. I mean, I think the endeavor of building a company is risky in and of itself. So maybe that's an indication of my tolerance for risk. But, you know, the reason that we thought it was necessary to engage in the Save Canadian Mining initiative and to ultimately endeavor to change this policy is because we were seeing the disproportionate impact it was having on our clients. And my simple answer to individuals who are considering doing something similar, in my perspective, it needs to meaningfully change the worlds of the people in your direct ecosystem, either your company or the people that you care about. In our case, we care very, very deeply about our clients, and we're dismayed to hear about how these changes have been negatively impacting them for a very long time. And so that is the piece of advice that I would instill, is that it needs to be something that is worth the risk. And I think that in the case of Save Canadian Mining, it definitely is worth that risk. And I'm eager to see the positive impact it has on the mining sector. But the one thing that's actually not intrinsically clear just in the name is that it's going to have a tremendous impact on the small cap sector at large. So for those who are thinking about engaging in something on that level, I would highly recommend that you select carefully and make sure it's something that that you really, really care about and will meaningfully impact your world and the world of the people that you're working with.
Excellent. Thank you so much, Bianca. Thank you, Nasim, Bianca, and Joanne, for an absolutely fantastic panel, for all of those questions that have come through, the many dozens that have not yet been answered. We will certainly be providing some more information, and I can tell you each of these individuals are incredibly responsive in reaching out if you'd like to engage personally. We're just about to wrap up this particular session. Earlier, we had on our agenda the MOU, which is just about to take place here at the venue in Toronto. I'll welcome up Mr. Jacques Ndumtumbe, Vice President of the Chamber, for a quick 30-second remark, after which we'll turn attention to our table for the signing of this MOU, and the counter-signing of the MOU will take place in Botswana, and we'll then immediately move to our break. Mr. Jacques Ndumtumbe for a background to this historic agreement. Thank you.
So just prior to COVID, we came to Botswana. I was with Dr. Lakshmanan, CEO of Process Research Ortec. We had a great trip. We actually went from Gaborone. We traveled to Pilikwe, beautiful village. And in Pilikwe, we met with, we saw the Kotla. I hope it's the right pronunciation. Then we met with the Village Development Board, or the Village Development Committee. And this structure was quite impressive in a way that shows how projects should be conducted in the continent, inside out, which is basically from the people to explain how investors can have an impact. And today we are very proud to have Prashant Patak, CEO of Eureka and Ekagrata, and Dr. Lakshmanan, Prashant to sign an important MOU with the Citizen Entrepreneurship Development Agency, with Lucara, and Gamele, which is a trust community fund. So thank you very much. This is a great start for much more to come. Thank you.
Jacques, thank you very much. Incredible to see the sorts of deals and transactions taking place so soon after the first trip that was done to Botswana. And this is certainly not the first. In fact, the initial MOU since the very first visit to Botswana last year was signed, I think, within a week on the ground. And so many others have followed. So to both Prashant and to Dr. Lakshmanan, who are joining us, a warm welcome. I'm going to ask that the cameras are handed over to the table for the signing. That will take place in Toronto, at which point we will hand over to Botswana for the document that will then be countersigned. And thankfully, in a digital world, we can do all of this electronically in real time, concluding deals. Thank you, Six. This is technology in action that ensures these transactions take place. And I'll now cross over to our live in-person table for the signing here in Toronto. Prashant, I'd ask you to kindly sign the document and hit send on the DocuSign on the laptop in front of you. Thank you very much, sir. Thank you so much. And I'd like to ask Dr. Lakshmanan if he would kindly step forward to witness on the paper signature. Dr. V.I. Lakshmanan of Process Research Ortec and a wonderful supporter of the Chamber. Thank you very much, sir. And finally, Vice President Mr. Jacques Ndumtumbe to be the final witness on the agreement. Thank you very much. We now cross over live to Botswana, where Nassim Lari, who has been critical to this MOU, will lead for the counter-signing. Thank you.
Okay, afternoon. We are handing over to CIDA, Citizen in Development, to sign in the memorandum. And then he's handing it over to Hamalete Trust. Hamalete Development Trust. Thank you. The signing is being witnessed by the Minister of Minerals, who is also the MP of this area. We thank you very much, sir, for that. Okay, they're taking a picture. That's Lukara Botswana continuing to achieve its goals for community development. All right, thank you very much. I believe now we are switching back to Toronto, Canada.
Thank you very much to all dignitaries, and we'll now take our break. Please, a quick reminder as you take the break and return in around 20 minutes that for those online, our virtual expo is open. Some incredible partner organizations of the Chamber are featured. So take a look, they're interactive videos, and we'll see you in just around 20 minutes. Thank you so much. Good morning once again across Botswana and the continent, as well as to all our guests in Toronto and in Canada. It is by great pleasure, but also slightly saddening to have to bring us to the last session of an incredible 3-day summit. Many are asking, when does this happen again? You can be sure the events will continue, and we will do so in person to the greatest capacity possible when appropriate, and of course, look forward to much more extended travel and trade with the continent. Well, while many of us have not been flying of late, cargo shipments have needed to move, and much of that has happened by air. Two key issues confronted Canada at the start of the COVID-19 crisis that were incredibly adapted and addressed by one amazing African company, Ethiopian Airlines. And we'll be in conversation as I'm about to welcome Mr. Samson Orega, who's the Managing Director for Canada. His achievements are numerous. He joined us here in Toronto just toward the end of last year, but since then has been an incredible supporter of the Chamber, as well as with Canada's strategic engagement across the continent. This included coordination of the flights and travel of Prime Minister Justin Trudeau during the historic engagement and country visit to the continent, where 4 countries were visited, accompanied by Minister Mary Ng, Minister Champagne, and many others who were there, including members of Parliament. Mr. Orega has also been commended by the Government of Canada through formal letters of thanks from both the Minister of Foreign Affairs and the Minister of Trade for the incredible role of Ethiopian Airlines in bringing back Canadians who found themselves stranded during the COVID-19 crisis and those early stages at the onset. Mr. Orega has got a deep background in Ethiopia, a country where he hails from and where he continues to have close ties, the headquarters of Ethiopian Airlines based out of Addis Ababa. At this particular point, I'd like to introduce a video detailing some of the important operations around cargo and the delivery of masks and essential equipment, in addition to other goods that have been flowing. Ethiopian Airlines is the only airline that did not stop operating at any stage during the pandemic out of Canada, and continues to be one of the few airlines in the world that has neither accepted government subsidies, has not laid off a single employee, and continues to show profitability without any form of support or intervention by the state. We'll have a look at the video, and once you've seen that, our next speaker on stage, standing right here, will be Samson Orega, MD of Ethiopian Airlines for Canada. Thank you.
COVID-19 marks the latest episode in a series of challenges the world has seen over the years. As a veteran African carrier, we always stay true to our noble mission of serving people in good and bad times. Since COVID-19 broke out, we've been at the forefront of the global efforts to save lives. As the world continues to grapple with COVID-19, we'll keep saving lives.
Guys, that was quite an inspiring introduction. So it's surprising that COVID has not only changed the way how we live in today, but it has changed also the way how we greet. It forced us to live in different time zones at the same time. So had it not been for COVID, we all would have been in this beautiful roof. But we could not able to do that. So I would say good morning for all participants from Canada, and then good afternoon from Africa. So good morning, good afternoon, Excellencies, Ministers, Ambassadors, distinguished guests. In a gathering of such a large virtual gathering, it may be difficult to recognize all distinguished guests. So it is suffice to say all protocols observed. It is a great pleasure and special honor for me, on behalf of over 18,000 hardworking men and women of Ethiopian Airlines, to address such a distinguished gathering at the African Accelerating 2020, organized by the Canadian African Chamber of Business. First of all, allow me to thank the organizers of such a grand e-gathering to talk about our growing and shining continent. My special thanks and recognition goes to the board chairman of Canada Africa Chamber of Business, Sebastian, and president of Canada Africa Chamber of Business, Gareth Blue, for their boundless passion and selfless contribution for the African continent and tireless effort in getting us together in such a platform during these challenging times. Ethiopian Airlines has a proud history that stretches more than 7 decades. In that time, Ethiopian has been a pioneer and a leader in aviation industry, launching African into the jet age, connecting the continent with all corners of the globe with its extensive network, and earning a reputation for service and safety. More than just an airline, Ethiopian represents the pride and progress of great people and the symbol of the new spirit of Africa. And personal travel is important. The ability to see the world, try new experiences, encounter new cultures, and reconnect with our families and heritage. There are the best ways to remind us of how much we all have in common. But air travel is also hugely important in terms of economics. Business travelers can measure the distance to any parts of the world in hours than weeks or months. Perishable goods can reach far-flung markets without spoiling. And since we all live under the same sky, air transport provides important connections to the global economy for all countries, regardless of their land or sea links. So this connection between Africa and the rest of the world will provide new ways for our people to engage, for our businesses to connect, and for our economies to thrive. The continued expansion of Ethiopian Airlines global flight offerings is yet another example of the outstanding achievements of fellow Africans and Ethiopians, and our exceptional team in building and growing the world-class international airlines. We at Ethiopian Airlines are very passionate about our airline, and this is the main reason and success factor for the airline to serve the continent in good and bad times. For the past 7 decades. In talking about Ethiopian Airlines, I can keep you here the whole day. So I will be very brief, and I will talk about connectivity between Canada and the continent of Africa, Canada, Ethiopian Airlines, and Canada and African businesses. Africa is, as we know, a large continent, but unfortunately a forgotten continent. Investors and people, you just can't afford to ignore Africa. Whether the Western Hemisphere agrees to join us and recognize the 21st century is an African century. Africa is rising, Africa is growing, and Africa is now the popular destination for foreign direct investment from all over the world. Economists predict that in the coming 3 decades, there will be 2 major crises in the world, which are food and fuel, and they are abundantly located in Africa. So FDI is going to come to Africa. So why, when we say the 21st century is an African century, as you can see from your slides, there is 1.3 billion young population who is ready to do business. The fastest growing, actually, we used to be the second fastest growing economy in the world, but now we are the fastest growing continent in the world. Large landmass, 6% GDP growth in the next decade. 60% of world's uncultivated arable land, and destination, of course, for food security. Fast-growing middle income, untapped natural resources, which we have been discussing today, and major FDI investment. When we go to Ethiopia, the lions are roaring in Ethiopia. We have a double-digit growth, GDP growth. Infrastructure is hugely undergoing. And Addis Ababa is the first city in sub-Saharan African countries to have a light train system. Significant improvement in Human Development Index, and all inclusive economic development in all areas. So when we come to, excuse me, this is the third slide. When we come to the connection between Canada and Canada, as we know, Canada is the world mining hub, a global mining leader, largest mining supply sectors globally with more than 3,200 companies supplying engineering, geotechnical, environmental, financial, and other services to mining operation. Rank among top 5 countries in global production of potash, uranium, aluminum, and cobalt, and so on. Proven capabilities in infrastructure and aircraft and train manufacturing. When you see growing ties between Canada and Africa, as you can see from the map, those are Canadian businesses in Africa. Mining assets, Canada has mining assets over $31.6 billion in 39 African countries. Growing investment ties with African countries, and large presence of African diaspora in Canada. When we see the ties between Canada and Ethiopia, trade between Canada and Ethiopia was 200 million, and it's growing. Canada minted Ethiopian 1 birr coin after the Royal Canadian Mint Company won the contract with National Bank of Ethiopia. Agricultural products such as spices and coffee make up the majority of imports from Ethiopia to Canada. Flours and injera made from teff, a gluten-free and highly nutritious grain, when of course you enjoy when you fly Ethiopian Airlines, are also part of the export items. When we see growing ties between Canada and Ethiopian Airlines in particular, the earlier slide, sorry, the first direct flight link between Africa and Canada has been established back in 2012. And we have purchased 29 Q400 aircraft from Bombardier, de Havilland. List price of those equipments was $900 million. So this means we are creating jobs for Canadians. Maintenance and pilot training capabilities for the aircraft in the region. We have developed our capabilities to maintain all Q400 and all Q series aircrafts so that we can deliver those services to African small airlines, which of course indirectly creating market opportunity for Bombardier. Approval from Ethiopian Civil Aviation Authority and US Federal Aviation for full airframe maintenance capabilities of all Q series aircrafts of de Havilland. Q400 is also a core fleet of Ethiopian partner, ASCA and Malawi. When we see Ethiopian Airlines history, Ethiopian Airlines is a pioneering African aviation since 1946. So if you see the first, in 1946, we had the first scheduled operation to Cairo. In 1958, first flight to Frankfurt. In 1960, first east to west African flights. But before this, in order to fly from one Western African countries to the other, or to neighboring, that also is possible, you need to fly via Europe. So Ethiopian Airlines is the first African airline to connect West with East and Central Africa to South Africa. In 1962, we became the first airline to introduce jet service in Africa. In 1984, we became the first African airline to procure 767, Boeing 767. In 1998, we have launched transatlantic flight to US. In 2010, we became the first African airline again to purchase Boeing 777, the longest long-range aircraft in our world. And in 1911, we became a member of Star Alliance, the biggest and oldest Star Alliance in the aviation industry. In 2012, the only direct operation between, we have introduced the only direct operation between Canada and Africa. In 2012, we became the first African airline and the second from the world, in fact, next to Japan, to acquire Boeing 787 Dreamliner. In 2013, we became the only airline to connect West and Central Africa with Brazil. In 2016, we acquired the first A350. So here is an African airline who is, of course, leading the world next to Japan, even before Canada, to acquire Boeing Dreamliner. So Ethiopian Airlines is a role model for whatever initiative is going on in Africa, whatever business initiative is going on in Africa. Unfortunately, the dominant opinion has it that all companies owned and operated by Africans are failures. And the other dominant opinion is businesses that are emerged in Africa are failures. But here is an airline defining both dominant opinion. So when we come to the connectivity between Canada and the rest of Africa, Ethiopian Airlines is the major gateway and the shortest gateway to Africa. From Canada, you can depart early in the morning from Toronto Airport, and you will arrive early in the morning at Addis Ababa Airport, and you can connect 62 cities in Africa. Same is true for cargo. So we have 5 weekly flights out of Toronto to Africa, and we are ready to go daily. And we have already requested the government of Canada to increase our frequency to daily and for the introduction of new service to Montreal, which, of course, if we start, we will be the first sub-Saharan African countries or the first African company to connect sub-Saharan African with the province of Quebec. So this is the connectivity map. So with this, I will wrap up my presentation, my very small presentation, and thank you so much for listening.
Well, Samson, thank you very, very much for those remarks and congratulations on the achievements. Going back to the connection that you alluded to, that history between Canada, Africa, but particularly Ethiopia, what struck you as key takeaways from the visit of the Prime Minister earlier this year? And particularly in light of that, how significant do you think the signing of the MOU was with the Ethiopian Chamber of Commerce and sectoral associations? And by the way, congratulations on your hand in making that deal possible. Any reflections there? Because that was quite a pivotal moment as the first conference.
Thank you so much, guys. Indeed, first of all, I would like to appreciate the things that your chamber is doing. It's spectacular. And regarding the Prime Minister last visit of course, it shows that Africa is now a continent where everybody should pay attention to. If you remember, I was saying this, as we speak, we have, before COVID, we had flights to China and Asia with large number of flights between China and Africa. And when you see across Atlantic, or when you see flight numbers to North America compared to the Chinese and Indian, it will tell you something. We had flights departing from Addis and China, 50 flights departing from Addis and China between those countries, and from Canada only 5 flights a week. So this by itself can tell you a lot. And I keep saying that, you know, Canadian companies should wake up and, you know, take the opportunities of this growing and rising star continent. So the trip of the Prime Minister has shown that there would be a big collaboration between the continent and Canada, and that Canadian companies has to take this advantage.
How many destinations are you flying to across the continent? Because once one connects directly into Addis from Toronto, it's quite a record number. I think you're possibly the 7th largest hub in the world at the moment. Just any reflections on that?
We are actually the 4th largest airline.
My apologies.
No problem. Based on the extensive network that we have, and based on the countries that we serve. We serve over 89 countries, but we have 127 international destinations, of which 62 are in Africa. So you can just easily guess that in Africa there are 54 countries, but we do fly to 62 cities, which means in one country we do fly more than a city. So there is a big network between that we have developed between Africa and the rest of the world. So network is as education is the greatest equalizer of the world today. For business, connectivity is one of the major in the equation, one of the major elements in the equation. So without air connectivity, you couldn't think of doing business with any country. And of course, without those routes, fast cargo routes that we have between Africa and the rest of the world, you cannot think of any business. Today, we are helping various African countries to get their products out in the European market. On daily basis, we export flowers to East African countries, to European markets, and of course Canada as well. So it is we are playing a very crucial role in the continent's economic agenda. And of course, this has been also going for the past so many decades. In 1960s, before even, Africa was either Portugal or English or UK or France. But during the time, because Ethiopia was one of the country who has never been colonized, and Ethiopian Airlines was there as a Pan-African carrier, we were helping all those heads of state, Pan-African heads of state, on their trips to various countries. So we played, and of course we are still playing a great role in the continent's economic and social and Africanism agenda.
Fantastic. And as part of that agenda, you're certainly able to do it as a profitable airline, one of the few in the world that's remained profitable despite this current period. How big a part was the cargo operations within the model of retaining profitability, and just any information about your cargo offerings, for those who are getting goods between Canada and African markets?
Yeah, let me give you a glimpse of the entire operation. Both cargo and passenger. So on average, last year we have uplifted close to 13 million passengers between our networks, and the company was close to 20 billion USD, and we have over 54 dedicated cargo destinations with 10 777 freighters. In fact, those strategic objectives that we set, we have business units, specific business units. Cargo is one of the business units. So before COVID, we operate 777 freighters, full freighters.
Right.
even in Canada, Air Canada, they don't have 777 freighter. So when this COVID emerged, so we could able to tap the opportunity and seize the opportunity and start delivering those badly needed medical equipments to all over the world. So on average, on yearly basis, we grow 25% in size. For the past 10 years, consecutively, we have grown 20%, between 20 to 25%. And the annual revenue that we are making currently, before COVID, in fact, was close to 5 billion USD. So during this COVID season, we operated 360 cargo flights, delivering urgently needed medical equipments to all over the world. Right. To Canada, we brought close to 40 million face masks to the government of Manitoba and Quebec, as well as Ontario. And also we have, as you might know, we brought so many Canadian families back home who were in different businesses around the world. So we helped close to 2,700 Canadians to come back home. So we played our crucial role, not only in the continent, but also across the world. So cargo from Africa, like the equipment is very important for cargo because the mostly, especially the mining sector, if we concentrate on the interaction between Canada and Africa, mining companies, we are exporting so many products from here as well, helping those mining companies to Africa. And recently, actually, a day before yesterday, we uplifted close to 50 tons of equipment for Ford company to South Africa. So you need those aircrafts, right? 777 freighters, huge long-range cargo equipments. So the per annum, on average, we uplift 400,000 tons of cargo.
And the airline is, though government is the shareholder, it's entirely privately run and privately operated. I'd love to get some of your thoughts on how that impacts the airline, but also to add to that question, you mentioned Ethiopian as Pan-African. Of course, there are many other carriers currently flying that are either owned outright or managed by Ethiopian. So could you speak a bit to that private sector dynamic, as well as your Pan-African agenda with other national carriers beyond simply Ethiopian?
So, it like I said before, the dominant opinion is anything owned by African governments or business owned by government is a failure. Yeah. But Ethiopian Airlines, to the contrary, have disproved that premise of logic. Like you said, Ethiopian Airlines is 100% owned by Ethiopian government. So one of the success factors that we consider is the corporate governance. Although it is being owned by Ethiopian government, it is fully run and operated by professionals. Our executive management team, our CEO, Mr. Tolde Gebramariam, he has an extensive knowledge and a very good professional career in this industry for 35 years. Mm-hmm. So he joined when he was very young. Like myself, I have joined the company when I just graduated from the university, my bachelor degree. So all the professionals coming from different universities with good grades, so they will join the company and they will stay there in their entire life. And there is this clear demarcation between the involvement of government and the professionals doing the actual job in the company. So they cannot intervene in the daily affairs and in the daily businesses of the company, government officials. So on this occasion, I would like to thank the government of Ethiopia for letting the company run by itself and become one of the success factors of the world that we live in today. And besides that, we believe in cooperation. We believe in integration. As opposed to competition with our African brothers. So that's why we helped many African governments to launch their own national airlines. So ASKY was one, we can mention ASKY as a very successful regional airline integrating West Africa and Central Africa. It's owned by Ethiopian Airlines and as well as the government of Togo. And we have another equity management in Malawi. Now, actually, we have close to 7 equity managed companies, airline companies, in different parts of Africa. So ASCA is our second hub, next to Addis Ababa is our main hub. Second hub is in West Africa, which is ASCA. That is the hub which helped us to connect New York and the West Coast with the Western Africa. And we have our southern hub in Malawi and central hub now. We are also setting up that. So we are helping those countries to have their own national carrier, so that we can share the experiences that we have with them. And apart from that, there are, of course, hurdles. I mean, I believe that there are so many people, my brothers and sisters from Africa, maybe who are in this aviation industry. There are so many hurdles in doing business in Africa. So those operational challenges, the taxes, the air tax issues. So I would encourage them to address those kind of issues so that African companies, especially in the aviation industry, can flourish and thrive in the continent.
And a final question based off some comments yesterday. We were noting how you can have lunch in Gaborone, make your way to the airport, and it's breakfast here in Toronto. That's the ease of connectivity and the directness. And you are the only carrier going directly from Toronto onto the continent. What is your plan and vision heading up operations here in Canada? What's the legacy you want to leave for the African continent?
Yeah, Canada is a very crucial market for us. Although Europe and North America in our business model is somehow a matured market, but there is still a growing business interest between Canada and the continent of Africa. We know Africa by heart. So we have been in that business for over 7 decades. So, and now Canada, we started flying only 2 flights a week back in 2012, but immediately we have increased that frequency to 3 thrice weekly flights, and we moved in 2015. We moved it to 5 weekly flights, and we are actually not only interested but highly pleading the government of Canada to increase our frequencies, because there is a huge market, and no one today can take you to Africa as fast as Ethiopian Airlines do. So the legacy that I personally wanted to leave before leaving my position in here is I want to increase the frequency out of Toronto daily. And Quebec is also another big province. And we also anticipate the demand is also huge, both business and tourism and leisure traffic. So we also have already applied, I believe it was 1 year before, to start a direct flight between Montreal and Africa. That would make Ethiopian Airlines to connect sub-Saharan African countries direct. No one, as we speak, is connecting that part of the province with sub-Saharan African countries.
Fantastic. Mr. Samson Arega, thank you so much for joining us and for your support of the Chamber. Congratulations and all the best for your success ahead.
Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Samson Arega. Ladies and gentlemen, at this particular point, I'm going to invite, as I take a seat quickly, so I'm still within the camera view, our next speaker, a key private equity leader who's now set up a venture capital fund. He's left the United States, where he was based for a while. Zachariah George, if you would turn your mic on and your video, I'm going to make my way to the podium, and I look forward to introducing you. Welcome.
Thank you, Gareth. Appreciate it.
Well, Zachariah George was certainly a figure during my time in South Africa that loomed large. He's co-founder and chief investment officer at the Startup Bootcamp Africa Group, a leading multi-corporate backed venture accelerator program on the continent. In 2013, he founded Cactus Advisors, a specialist corporate finance advisory firm with a micro venture capital fund that has advised and invested in over 50 of Africa's top technology ventures. They include companies like Flutterwave, Q2Bank, mPost, Recomed, and several others. He's also currently a principal at Nedbank Venture Capital and Alternative Investments, one of the big banks in South Africa. He was co-featured on the cover of Fast Company in Africa for the May 2018 edition, and has been across a number of lists and other key accolades where he's been recognized, including among the 10 most influential people in technology. He's formerly headed up an investment arm for a family office, a multifamily office investing in Africa. And prior to his move to the continent, he was based on Wall Street covering mergers and acquisitions. It's fantastic to see that as the opportunities are so clearly evident across the continent, individuals like Zachariah George are making their move and calling their home in Africa. I believe, Zach, you're currently joining us from Cape Town. Welcome, and thank you so much for delivering your keynote remarks on the investment landscape across the continent. Zachariah George.
Thank you. Thank you very much, Gareth. We miss you here in Africa, and hopefully we'll be able to entice you to come back here soon. Thank you, everyone, and I appreciate everyone in the audience listening. I'm going to go through a few slides to talk about the exponential impact and growth of venture capital in Africa over the last few years, and how corporates on the continent can create a big impact in fueling the growth of the VC industry, and some of the lessons that I've learned building this portfolio over the last 10 years. Okay. About 15 years ago, I was at business school at Stanford, and there was a professor called Randy Komisar, who's now a prominent venture capitalist in the Valley, and he said something that really struck me at the core of my being. And he said, of all the risks in the world, the most dangerous risk is a risk of spending your life not doing what you want, on the bet that you can buy yourself the freedom to do it later. If you really pause for a second and think about it, you don't have to answer me here, but how many of us in our lives are truly doing, from a work and career perspective, what we are truly passionate about? And how many of us are doing something hoping that we can buy ourselves the time to one day do our real true calling later? And that's what entrepreneurship is all about. It's about stepping outside of your comfort zone and doing something with the adequate amount of market research and support that makes you believe that what can be done through partnerships with corporates, with partners, with investors, can actually transform not just a country or a continent, but the entire world. And that's why venture capital plays a huge risk. It's people like angel investors, seed funds, later stage funds that have the ability to make the dreams that founders have on the continent of Africa real. And that's what I've been involved in for the last 10 years. Can everyone see my slides, by the way? Okay, I think so. Okay. Right, so the population on the African continent right now is about between 1.2 to 1.3 billion people. What's interesting to note is over the next 80 years, the turn of the century, Africa will account for nearly 1 in 3 people on our planet. So that's a net growth of 85% of the entire world's population growth will come from the African continent. Now that either is a massive structural, logistical, and infrastructural challenge, or it's a massive opportunity. And I choose to be someone that looks at a glass half full. And we've seen time and time again, Africa prove the world wrong in the way it has leapfrogged innovation. If you look at everything from mobile banking, prepaid wallets, to our robust insurance industry, and the way we have entirely skipped several ages of technology and moved to a mobile first economy. There's a lot that is in the works, especially given the fast growing nature of consumer internet the increased mobile penetration, and the purchasing power of consumers on the continent, which is growing quicker than any other place on this planet. And that's the reason why you will see a market increase in the amount of venture capital activity on the continent as a result of the tech disruption. So when I came to Africa about 10 years ago, there was only about $20 million of venture capital on the entire continent. Right? That's having been to Stanford and Silicon Valley as a young 20-year-old. That today is about 2 deals on any given Tuesday in San Francisco. But that $20 million is now ballooned to more than $2 billion as of the end of last year. So from a growth perspective, you've seen 100x growth in venture capital activity on the African continent, which is faster than any other region in the world. And what's even more interesting, as you can probably see in the slides, is that not only has the size of the VC industry grown exponentially, but also the number of companies being funded, the average size of each round, be it seed, Series A, Series B, or growth stage rounds, has also increased significantly. And there's a normaling or leveling out of valuations when it comes to comparing African technology ventures with their counterparts in the US, Canada, Europe, and Asia. And even despite the COVID-19 pandemic-induced recession, Africa is one of the only geographies in the world where you've actually seen an increase in VC activity compared to a similar period last year. So the first 9 months of this year have actually seen a 20% increase in venture capital funding on the continent and exits. It's an important point versus a similar point last year. Like I mentioned earlier, 2019 and the first 3 quarters of this year has been a record-breaking year for African VC. And the focus of venture capital on the continent has primarily been in 5 major sectors, and no prizes for guessing what those are. Financial services, which includes fintech and insurtech, logistics and mobility, and anything that solves a question of resource management within large urban developments and peri-urban areas, marketplaces and e-commerce, and then education technology and health technology is getting a much bigger sort of portion of the pie that goes towards VC. And if you look at where the major funds that invest in African technology come from, what's interesting to observe, and a lot of you may find this surprising, is there are more than 100 active VC firms on the African continent. Most of them tend to be concentrated in South Africa, Kenya, Nigeria, and Egypt. But there are also more than 150 VC funds across the world, mostly in North America, Europe, and Asia, that have Africa as a primary focus. And I'll get to some of these numbers later on, but high-level firms like Goldman Sachs, Google Ventures, Sequoia, Index, some of the top VC funds in the world are allocating significantly larger percentages of their portfolio to African tech ventures. The major tech hubs in Africa are Nairobi, Lagos, and Cape Town. And I'll get to the reasons why these centers have become innovation centers of excellence over the last 3 to 5 years. Now, one thing to note when you and I think of innovation and thriving startup ecosystems, you'd normally think of Silicon Valley or possibly London. Now, what makes a startup ecosystem, a ripe hotbed for innovation? It's a combination of 5 things that myself and my team have learned over the last few years. One is you obviously have to have talented tech-savvy entrepreneurs, and that's And that includes not just developers or designers, but also people like digital marketers, people in advertising, and students graduating out of top-tier technical universities and business schools that opt to not go and work for corporate or work in academia, but rather join their colleagues in technology ventures. So that's an important trait that you see in Silicon Valley a lot, and you're seeing it in cities like Nairobi, Cape Town, and Lagos. The second thing is risk capital, right? So note that I mentioned the word risk capital and not just capital. So there is in cities like Silicon Valley, in New York, in London, in Tel Aviv, or in Bangalore, there is a growing pool of risk capital from high net worth individuals, families, and VC groups that are gradually becoming aware of early stage VC instruments as an alternative asset class. Number three is the importance of large corporates collaborating with startups. We just heard from a senior executive at Ethiopian Airlines earlier. So, about 4 or 5 years ago, it would be very hard pressed for a large bank, a large retailer, a telco, an insurer, a manufacturing firm, or an airline to work with a startup. But if you look at the most pioneering innovations coming out of the US and the Americas, or even parts of Europe, they've always started at the coalface at technology startups that have eventually become large technology firms. So it's important for existing corporates to work with startups early on, from an outsourcing internal innovation and product development into proof of concepts and license agreements with startups. It's a win-win situation for both parties. Then you've got the concept of accelerators, incubators, and high growth entrepreneurial support organizations that provide a great channel to facilitate corporates working with startups. You've got several world-class accelerators that most of you are familiar with, like Y Combinator, like Techstars, like Startup Bootcamp, which is the organization that I founded in Africa, Plug and Play. And these accelerators create a safe, structured learning environment where founders of companies like Uber, Airbnb, Twitter, Dropbox, Stripe, etc., can truly flourish and scale. And you've seen these accelerators create similar ventures on the African continent. Last but not least, you can never ignore the government. But what's important is government definitely has a role to play in building the future entrepreneurs of the continent, but that role has to be supportive and not interfering. So building an active, willing, and red tape light government that provides things like R&D grants and tax subsidies and incentives to small and medium-sized businesses and startups is very crucial. So any ecosystem that has components of these five, not components, I'm sorry, that has attributes of these five components tends to very quickly rise up and become a thriving startup ecosystem. And you have several of these in Africa today. Another thing about folks in the audience here that are interested in investing in African technology ventures and capitalizing on the immense growth we've had is understanding business models in Africa. So unlike Silicon Valley and New York or the sort of first world, where B2C business models tend to work there, in Africa and most emerging markets, B2B2C business models and B2B business models work a lot better. And one of the reasons for that is the high cost of acquiring customers if you're going direct to consumer. In Africa, customer lifetime values are a lot longer, but the cost of acquiring them is higher. So it's very important for you as a founder of a technology startup to work with insurance companies, banks, retailers, telcos, tech and media firms to essentially pivot your business models to lower your customer acquisition costs by using distribution networks that large corporates have. And that's where things like POCs, which stands for proof of concepts, and commercial partnerships are super important. As a founder of an African technology venture, or just as a founder of a tech venture, it's important to understand that unlike the 80s and 90s, when I and possibly a lot of you grew up, if you were to stand out and be competitive, you would normally be competitive from a price perspective or a quality standpoint. So you either were the cheapest product in the market, or you were the one that had the highest quality, where people would be less elastic towards price. What's interesting to note in the last 5 to 10 years, and this is even more prevalent in Africa, is what people really want is products or services that make their lives more convenient, and products and services that save them time. And when you look at these two aspects into how the continent is growing, it's burgeoning middle class. It's very important as founders and also as investors in these ventures to understand what the end goal is and know your customer better than anything else. Some of the things that venture capitalists that invest in Africa look for, which is similar to a lot of traits that VCs look for globally, or we look at strong teams. Because venture capital in Africa is relatively new, about 8 to 9 years old, it's hard to find a lot of repeat founders, but VCs look for coachable, mentorable founders that straddle the line between being confident and assertive versus being arrogant. And that's something that makes a big difference. The team always comes first. Total addressable market, often called TAM in VC circles. It's very important as a founder in a technology venture to understand how big your target market is, but to be realistic about solving a niche problem locally first. And the benchmark that most VCs use in the African continent is a total addressable market by year 5 of at least $100 million, but ideally pushing that to the $1 billion mark. The holy grail from a investing standpoint is how much traction do you have, and this is where B2B business models are super important. When a company gets to $100,000 in monthly recurring revenue is when the majority of Series A and Series B investors come in. Technology and IP is extremely important from a patent perspective, and most successful African technology ventures tend to incorporate their IP overseas, either in the US, in the UK, or Singapore or Mauritius, because of favorable IP and tax treaties. And then last but not least, the last couple of points are about the importance of using technology to transform industries. And this is where the big opportunity of investing in Africa comes in, is every single thing that we touch, feel, taste, hear, and smell in Africa, be it transportation, be it the state of healthcare, be it our schooling systems, the way we consume food and the way we consume knowledge, requires disruption from a tech perspective. And because both the consumer population and industry as a whole is growing faster than many other places in the world, it's important to invest in technology at the early stage that transforms industries. Some of the metrics that venture capitalists use specifically in African investments is understanding, like I mentioned earlier, what the lifetime value of your business is, and how does that factor in versus your cost of acquiring customers. So as an early investor in more than 50 of Africa's largest tech startups, I always look at businesses that minimize their customer acquisition cost, but can maximize the lifetime value of a customer. And related to that, there tends to be an obsession in more private equity and later stage investors or traditional investors with the concept of breaking even. When do I become profitable? When do I break even? The reality is, in today's world, the most important metric when you look at investing in early stage ventures is how quickly can you scale? How do you reach exponential growth? The reference I often give to investors is, if profitability was the only metric you cared about, you would have missed Amazon, you would have missed Uber, you would have missed Twitter, and you would have missed a whole bunch of really iconic technology ventures, because none of them are profitable early on. But as long as they're growing exponentially and have a path towards profitability, that's okay. And then the last thing from a unit economics perspective is to understand how you balance your growth with your churn. Churn just means the amount of customers that you lose over a period of time. So these are some metrics that over the last few years from an African tech perspective have really helped drive more investment into the continent. And sort of the last thing I would talk about for any entrepreneurs here is to really attract the right type of partnerships, investment, and support. You really have to focus on validation. No matter how long you've been in business or how much funding you've received, that has no bearing on your true value as a business unless you're able to get product market fit and a problem solution fit. And that's something that has really driven the message home on the African continent over the past few years. So to summarize, there's been an exponential growth in venture capital on the African continent. Returns are a lot higher than the average for VCs globally. As an angel investor myself, and through the accelerators that I've run and now the fund, we've achieved IRRs of north of 50% annually over a portfolio of more than 50 companies. And there is a massive gap in the early stage seed funding of African ventures, where African ventures typically trade at a 30 to 40% discount to their peers in the Americas and in Europe and Asia. And that catch up typically happens at Series A and Series B, where valuations are pretty much in line with their counterparts in the West. So for anyone that is keen to learn more about the opportunity of investing in early stage African tech ventures, I'd be very keen to give you more feedback and context. But thank you for taking the time to listen to the state of venture capital in Africa. And I want to end with a quote from one of my favorite human beings of all time, Nelson Mandela, who said, "It always seems impossible until it's done." Thank you.
Zach, thank you very much. And indeed, what a wonderful way to round off Mr. Nelson Rolihlahla Mandela, also an honorary Canadian. And just outside, we have the street after which he's named. Fantastic presentation. I take it you have no regrets on leaving Wall Street, given the sorts of opportunities you've just identified.
No, absolutely not.
Great number of questions. The first one is, will your presentation be made available publicly or some variant of it?
Yeah, absolutely. Canada Africa is definitely open to share that with anyone here that needs a copy, but very happy for it to be shared.
Thank you very much, Zach. Two questions, if I may. The first goes to, it's from a Canadian perspective. At what stage do you typically go for investment that is based out of North America? Because of course your key focus is being on the ground, and that's what you've done and made a life on the continent. So at what stage do you seriously consider capital coming from North America, bearing in mind that obviously someone sitting here doesn't have the on-the-ground knowledge that you have, and you're looking for partners who possess that kind of know-how? Any reflections there?
Yeah, absolutely. So about 7 to 8 years ago, there were almost no funds from North America investing in the African continent. And just 5 years ago, you saw a massive explosion of interest. Now, most investments from North America go into Series A and Series B deals, which translates into, typical investment of $2 million or more. So most VC funds on the African continent focus on Series A and Series B, and the investors tend to be developmental fund institutions and large pension funds and mutual funds. Where where the biggest gap is from a funding perspective and an opportunity standpoint is actually pre-Series A. But what you really should be doing is investing in a basket of companies. Never, as an investor, never expose yourself too much into either one particular country or one particular sector. You want to be long sort of the general financial services, telco, retail, and commerce industries across multiple geographies. And you want to be investing in companies that have gone through world-class programs where for every dollar that you invest as a foreigner, you're not seeing 90 cents of that dollar going into fixing someone's HR systems or their legal or their tech or their marketing. Out of that dollar, you want to see 90 cents going into getting more customers and growing and scaling. And that's why investing early, but investing early in companies coming out of world-class incubators and accelerators, when they're about 6 months to a year away from an institution raise, is probably the most lucrative space from a pure return standpoint. And that's part of the work that I've been doing through the fund.
Fantastic. Zach, final question coming from the side of those seeking investment. Very typically, these great innovative ideas are backed by individuals who may not have a lot of interaction originally with people like yourself. Now, as they're entering the finance round, what is your advice on making that first impression? Because first contact, let's say, presumably from someone who reaches out to you today, what are you going to look at that makes you say, fantastic, I get it, this is the kind of person I want to meet? Any advice from you directly sitting on the other end as an investor?
Yeah, absolutely. It's first of all, like I mentioned earlier, I'm a big fan of founders that have humility and the ability to be mentored and coached. We see a lot of founders in Silicon Valley or in other parts of the world that are just arrogant and egotistical and think that they know better than everyone else. I look for people that are mentorable and coachable. I also look for founders that really understand their market better than anyone else. So most founders think that, they have no competition or they have one or two competitors. When the reality is VCs or investors usually have a much better perspective of the market than founders do, because they see a lot more decks and information than the founders directly. So you look for founders that really understand the market and almost fall in love with their customers. And then last but not least, you look for founders that have the ability to, you can't put a sort of score to it, but founders that can tell a really good story about how and why they're doing something. Storytelling is often one of the most underrated skills. And that's where charismatic founders all across the world create value for their customers.
Fantastic. Zachariah George joining us from Cape Town. Thank you so much. Congratulations. And to everybody who's soon to be invested in by you. And I have no doubt out of this, you'll see some great projects. Everything of the best as we build the continent. Have a wonderful afternoon.
Thank you, Gareth. Much appreciated. Good day, everyone.
Thank you, Zach. Well, it is bittersweet that we come to the final session and indeed the final keynote address to lead us out with our marching orders for the next year of activity. It is 26 years of the Canada-Africa Chamber of Business, and certainly going into year 27, no challenge has clearly proved too tough for us to overcome, and it's because of partnerships and sponsors that we're able to do that. And at this particular point, I'd like to take the opportunity to again do what we did at the opening of the session, and that is to recognize all of those that have made today possible. We've shown the role of the headline sponsors who've underwritten the conference, Nasim Lari and her team at Lucara Diamond and Lucara Botswana, but we also have many others who've been a key role, as we've alluded to, and I'd like to share some of those sponsors and partners. Mine Africa has been with the Chamber as the longest serving for a period of 18 years, and is the key supporter, backer, and organizer of the annual mining breakfast alluded to earlier today. Mine Africa has also been involved in the leadership of the Chamber. Bruce Shapiro, its current director, served as president for 23 years of the Canada-Africa Chamber of Business and remains on the advisory board. Wayne Floriani serves as secretary to this day at the Chamber. We also have a number of other key individuals who played a wonderful role, and I encourage each of you to visit the virtual exhibit to hear from them and see the latest activity. That virtual exhibit will be open throughout the next remainder of coming weeks, and certainly is an opportunity for those who haven't visited to do so, particularly the 5,500 people on our database who among those couldn't be at the conference with us during this week. Then we have a number of other sponsors as well. We've mentioned 6. There's Osenko, the leading vice president there. Tace to Blanche serves as treasurer of the Canada-Africa Chamber of Business. B2 Gold, great words from Neil Reeder yesterday, and their activity pioneering growth in Mali, as well as their presence in Namibia, has been a wonderful template of success. BM Dodo Strategic Design, based out in Kingston, is led by Brian Dodo, also a long-standing board member of the Chamber. Thank you for your support and the incredible design and back-end on the Chamber website. Braynon Harper Advisory, led by Andrew Braynon, who came on board as a sponsor last year. Thank you so much for your support. The Center for Risk Analysis, who provided their data and their analysis at no cost to members of the Chamber earlier this year. Thank you for your insights directly on the ground from the continent. Dundee Precious Metals, another long-standing supporter, based out of Toronto, but operational across Namibia. Your leadership, Nikolai Christoph and others, has been fantastic. Ernst & Young, in the coming weeks, we have an event in Zimbabwe looking at economic opportunities. A pleasure to partner with you. Ethiopian Airlines, need I say more? Connecting us and connecting the Chamber as well, ensuring a wonderful path of direct relations for cargo, but also for continued improvements and development of passenger services. Global Affairs Canada, who do so much. Much of their partnership has been outlined on a few projects, but it is a small microcosm of the team that is behind the scenes working across a variety of issues related to the African continent. So thank you very much to the Director General, Antoine Chevrier, to predecessors, as well as to Mr. Phil Halliday, who's a key point person for the Chamber. 27 years is a long time as we go into 2021, and our usual venue is Goodman's. Given the current restrictions we have, Goodman's LLP is not a conference venue. It's a fabulous law firm here in Toronto, and unfortunately, while we couldn't be there, we've been graciously hosted at the National Club. Hatch, who achieved phenomenal success in Africa, and our great Canadian company who expanded their footprint initially into SADC. Thank you for your ongoing support. Mr. Joe Lombard has been a key leader there. Hill and Knowlton Strategies, particularly Mr. Jack Hughes, who came on board with enormous support and expertise, particularly on Africa Free Trade. Thank you for your continued involvement and for what you've done this year. Ivanhoe Mines, Dr. Patricia Makesha, our keynote last year. Congratulations on what you've achieved despite the COVID environment, and all the best for the projects in the DRC, in which Hatch has been a key partner. The Kingdom of Lesotho, we were joined by the Prime Minister last year. Their ongoing support remains. MEC Capital, private equity, for believing in the Chamber. We thank you for your ongoing and ceaseless support, John. Mine Africa, as mentioned, the longest serving supporter. The Republic of Namibia, the first country to officially join the Chamber. We thank you too, particularly Consul General Walter McLean. The Federal Republic of Nigeria, 60 years of independence this year. It was an honor to celebrate with you and to welcome you on that occasion into the Canada-Africa Chamber of Business. Asina Resources, led by Alan Friedman, another great resources company. And also, Alan, you've been a long-standing board member of the Chamber. Thank you. Process Research Ortec, Dr. Lakshmanan, who backed the first conference we had in Botswana. Thank you. A signatory as well today to that deal that we had just a few hours ago. Radius Communications, led by Jeff Silverstein, for helping with the communications at the Chamber. We thank you. The Republic of Rwanda for your ongoing success and for your engagement with us and with investors. And then South Africa, a special thank you given the role of South Africa as the African Union chair this year. And we heard some fantastic remarks introducing His Excellency just a little earlier. They're also partners who've been promoting this event to get close to 1,000 registrants or viewers, including those at the in-person venues. Is certainly no easy feat, and there's a lot of competition for conferences right now, especially those that are virtual. So the following include the University of Toronto for helping with promotion, the Canada Black Chamber of Commerce for your fantastic leadership and organization that started relatively recently but has achieved great heights, the Southern Africa Canada Chamber of Business, with whom we have an MOU as our partners on the ground in SADC. Minister Mary Ng witnessed that particular deal in Cape Town earlier this year. Invest Africa, the Africa Trade Desk, Germ Consulting, the Circle of Global Businesswomen, Innerlead Consulting, Sky Groove, the Botswana Chamber of Mines, Kai Alum, the Africa Study Group, the CASA Foundation, Friends of Africa, and the Canada Arab Business Council. Without each one of you, to varying extents, the sorts of numbers and the sort of resources that make this possible, certainly we wouldn't be where we are today. And so a very special thank you as well to the Chamber Board. It's a board that exists today as a culmination of 26 years of leadership. And I thank as well those who serve on the advisory board, including Mr. Bruce Shapiro, past President Emeritus, as well as others like Joe Lombard and several seasoned executives, chaired very ably by Goodman's LLP's partner, originally from South Africa and based on Bay Street, Mr. Stephen Pincus. Well, ladies and gentlemen, may these partnerships continue to grow, and may we continue to grow them together. I welcome the chair of the board, Mr. Sebastian Spear-Gabra. Welcome.
I want to thank Lucara Diamonds in Botswana, our brothers and sisters in Botswana who have also been with us for the last 3 days, who have contributed so immensely to this program. I join Gareth in thanking all the other sponsors, not just the sponsors for even this year's conference, but those who over the last 26 years have really helped to make the chamber what it is today. The names are so many, and Gareth mentioned so many of them. And again, to really thank my brother Gareth from South Africa, and brother Jack from Gabon, and Susan from Uganda, and everyone else who has really taken time to watch our presentations and made presentations and tuned in, and all the technical staff who have made it possible for this to happen. Let the word go out that indeed a new generation of Africans have emerged, and that generation, frankly, it's not, doesn't have nightmares about the past, but they have nightmares about the future. Think about that statement for a minute. We have nightmares not about the past, but about the future, because we do not want in 30 years, when Nigeria becomes the third largest country on earth after India and China, to be still having these conversations. We want in 30 years, when our generation is finally getting old and trying to retire, that Africa would finally again, as it did centuries ago, be sitting at the same table with the great nations and the great continents of the world. So thank you all for supporting our program. Thank you all for all that you have done for the chamber, and let us continue to connect. Let us continue to engage with each other. And thank you so much again. Thank you. So, Mr. President, if you don't mind, I would call the whole conference to a close, and see you all again next year. Thank you very much.